Hey friends, welcome back to the Paranormal M channel. How's your day going? Drop a comment below and let me know. I really love being here, sharing my paranormal experiences from around the world and reading your comments. And by the way, thank you so much for sending in your own paranormal stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new videos. Now, let's get cozy, put on our headphones, and dive into today's paranormal experiences. Hey, so I've got a story I don't tell often, mostly because it still makes my throat tighten a little when I say it out loud. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and when I say I grew up there, I mean in it, in the thick of it. The woods weren't just nearby, they were the backdrop of everything. Back then, we didn't have phones in our pockets, no little screens tugging at our attention. We had long afternoons, muddy shoes, and the kind of imagination that makes a stick feel like a sword and a hollow log feel like a castle. My best friend back then was a girl named Jolene, and we were the kind of kids who could disappear into the trees for hours and come back sunburned, scratched up, and proud of it. We had this stretch of forest behind my family's place where the underbrush got so tangled you had to shoulder your way through it. We'd follow deer prints, dare each other to climb higher than we should have, hop over cold little streams that cut through the rocks like they'd been there forever. But fall was when the woods felt like they were opening up. Once the leaves started dropping, the forest floor showed itself, and paths that didn't exist in summer suddenly looked clear enough to follow. Every year, we'd push our exploring boundary a little farther. We even had what we called bases, secret spots we'd claim like we were the first people to ever find them. And the funny part is, no matter how brave we acted, we always stayed close enough that, if we stood on our toes, we could still catch a glimpse of my house through the trees. Until one day we didn't. It was one of those crisp afternoons when the air feels clean and sharp, and the woods look almost welcoming, like they're inviting you to come see something. Jolene and I packed like we were going on an expedition. A flashlight, a couple granola bars, a little pocket knife we weren't supposed to have, and this bright orange yarn from her mom's sewing basket. We figured if we wrapped it around tree trunks as we walked, we could always follow it back. And at first, it worked. We wound that yarn around a maple, then a pine, then a fat old oak, laughing at how serious we were being. Two kids acting like the forest was uncharted territory. We kept going, deeper, quiet enough that we stopped talking without even realizing it. Then we saw the tree. It was huge, older than anything around it, and the trunk split into two thick arms like a giant slingshot reaching up out of the ground. It didn't look real. It looked like something you'd see in a picture book. And right beside it, half buried in the slope of the hill under a mat of damp leaves and broken branches, there was this metal ring. Rusty, old. The kind of thing you don't usually find out in the middle of nowhere. We knelt down and started brushing away the leaves, and that's when our stomachs dropped a little. It wasn't just a ring. It was a handle, bolted into a wooden door set right into the earth like a hatch. Like a cellar door, except wrong. Too hidden. Too deliberate. Like it didn't want to be found. I remember Jolene whispering, "Do you think it's like a storm shelter?" Like saying something practical could make it normal. We both grabbed the handle anyway. It took a couple hard tugs before it gave, and when it did, it opened with this heavy, reluctant groan, wood scraping against dirt, like it hadn't moved in years. Underneath were steps, stone steps, leading down into absolute black. The flashlight beam didn't reach far. It just swallowed into the dark like the dark had weight. So we went down. The air changed immediately, cold and damp, like a basement that never gets sunlight. Every step made the sound of grit under our shoes, and the deeper we went, the quieter everything got. Like the forest had stayed up top, and we'd stepped into somewhere it couldn't follow. At the bottom, the stairs opened into this cramped little room. The walls were rough, packed earth or stone, I couldn't tell. The flashlight beam shook because my hands were shaking. And right there, in the middle of the floor, was one single thing. A photograph, not in a frame, not in a box, just lying there like it had been placed on purpose. I picked it up. The edges were worn soft, like it had been handled a lot. And when I turned it toward the light, my whole body went icy. It was a picture of two girls, two kids about our age. They were standing in front of a house that looked so much like mine it made my stomach roll. Same porch shape, same window placement, even the way the roof line dipped on one side. But it wasn't the house that got me. It was their faces. Their eyes were too dark in the photo, like somebody had shaded them in. And they were smiling, but not like kids smile. Their grins were stretched, a little too wide, a little too practiced, like they were trying to imitate happiness and getting it wrong. Jolene leaned in, saw it, and made this sound, like she tried to breathe and couldn't. We didn't discuss it. We didn't debate. We just turned and ran. We flew up those steps so fast I thought we'd fall. And when we burst out into daylight, it felt like we'd been underwater and finally broke the surface. Then Jolene grabbed my arm and said, "The yarn." We looked. Every loop we'd wrapped around the trees, gone. Not snapped, not trailing off, just not there. Like someone had walked behind us and unwound it neatly, quietly, taking our way home away. That's when panic really hit. We ran anyway. We guessed. We turned when we thought we should turn. We pushed through brush that clawed at our jackets. We were crying without even realizing it. And when we finally saw my house through the trees, when we finally saw it, my legs almost gave out with relief. We burst inside like wild animals, breathless and shaking. My mom took one look at us and her face changed completely. You know that look adults get when they're trying to stay calm, but something in their gut is already screaming. That. We tried to explain, talking over each other, tripping on our words. The split tree, the door in the hill, the stairs, the photograph with the house, all of it. My dad, of course, did the whole half-smile thing. Skeptical, amused, trying to make it into a joke. But when he saw how wrecked we were, how we couldn't stop shaking, his expression flattened out. So they came with us. And walking back into those woods with my parents felt completely different. The forest didn't feel playful anymore. It felt like it was watching. We searched for what felt like forever, following our memory more than any real trail. And then we saw it. That slingshot tree. Exactly like we remembered. My heart jumped so hard it hurt, because part of me thought, thank God we didn't imagine it. But when we looked around, there was nothing. No hatch, no rusty ring, no disturbed leaves, no spot where the earth had been opened, just untouched ground. And Jolene and I, we didn't even have to talk. We just looked at each other, and I knew she felt it too. Because we had been there. We had touched that handle. We had walked down those steps. We had held that photo in our hands. And yet, standing there with our parents, it was like the woods had swallowed the whole thing back up and smoothed the surface clean. It's been about 15 years now, and I still don't have a neat explanation. Jolene and I have gone back more than once, separately and together, trying to find that exact spot. We've stood by trees that looked almost right, paced off distances, searched hillsides after heavy rain when you'd think anything buried would show itself. Nothing. Not once. But I'll tell you what, every time I go back home and I catch sight of that tree line from the yard, I get this cold little shiver, like my body remembers before my brain even has time to think. And sometimes, just for a second, I can see it as clear as if it's right in front of me again. Those steps, that dark opening, and that photograph. Two girls, a house that looks like mine, and those eyes, those smiles. Like something in that forest found us first, and just let us borrow the secret for a moment before taking it back. So, I've always been the there's a reasonable explanation kind of person. I'm not saying weird stuff can't happen, but I've never really put much faith in paranormal stories, especially eyewitness accounts. People misremember things. Our brains fill in gaps. We get tired, we get jumpy, we convince ourselves something happened a certain way because it feels true. That's been my default setting for as long as I can remember. But a few nights ago, something happened that honestly rattled me. Like the kind of thing that sits in your chest afterward and won't leave. To give you a little context, I live with my partner. Her name's Mara. And for the past couple of weeks, she's been telling me our apartment has been acting off. She's mentioned the bedroom door drifting open when we were sure it was shut. Same with the closet. Closed one moment, cracked open the next. She's also said a few things have ended up on the floor for no obvious reason, like they were nudged or slid right off the dresser. And I'll be real with you, I brushed most of it off. Our doors are flimsy and slightly crooked in their frames, and the air in our place shifts whenever the heater kicks on. Plus, Mara loves those ghost hunting shows. She's into all that. Energy, spirits, the idea that places can hold on to emotions. And I always figured that when you're already looking for something paranormal, your brain starts tagging every little creak and slip as evidence. That's what I told myself anyway. Then came that night. We were in bed, lights out, winding down. It was quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the building settle. And out of nowhere, we both heard something thump inside the closet. Not a soft sound, not a little rustle. A solid, something fell sound. Mara immediately sat up, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment. She was whispering, asking if I heard it too. I did, but I tried to keep it casual. I remember saying something like, probably a shoe tipped over, or maybe a hanger slipped. We have a couple storage bins stacked a little too confidently up there too, so I figured one shifted. Eventually she fell asleep, but I stayed awake a bit longer, scrolling through a book on my phone. Not bright, just enough to read. I was lying on my back, phone held at chest level, and my eyes were basically aimed straight toward the closet doorway. And then, this is the part that makes my stomach tighten even now. Right there in front of me, maybe 5 feet away, near the closet, this round, pale sphere just appeared. It wasn't like a reflection on the wall. It wasn't a streak. It wasn't in the corner of my eye. It was dead center, clear, a shape. And for a split second it flared, like it pulsed, and the light was so sharp and bright it felt almost physical. Like someone had fired a camera flash right in the middle of a dark room. Except it wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from that thing. Then it faded out. Just like that. Maybe a second, maybe 2. But it was long enough for my whole body to react before my mind even caught up. Every hair on my arms and neck stood up. I felt this involuntary shiver roll through me, like my nervous system hit some ancient alarm button. I didn't scream or jump out of bed or anything dramatic. I just froze, staring at the darkness where it had been, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I didn't feel like I imagined it. Afterward, I kept replaying it, going through possibilities like a checklist. Could it have been an airplane? We're not far from a flight path, and you'll occasionally see light shift through the room. But again, those are moving sources. This wasn't moving. It didn't wander. It didn't scatter. Then I went even more skeptic brain and started thinking about eye stuff. Like, okay, flashes of light can be migraines, or floaters, or any number of neurological things. But everything I've ever heard about those is that they're usually peripheral, or they look like streaks or sparks. This wasn't that. This was straight ahead, in a specific spot in the room, with a clear shape. And maybe the weirdest part? It didn't feel like a simple optical trick. It felt like something external, something that happened in the space with me. I lay there afterward with my heart quietly hammering, trying not to wake Mara, staring at the closet like it might happen again. I don't think I blinked for a full minute. It didn't come back. But it changed something in me. Because now I'm stuck between two thoughts that don't fit together. One part of me still wants a neat explanation, something scientific and clean and boring. And the other part of me can't ignore how real it felt, how my body responded like it knew I'd just seen something I wasn't supposed to. So yeah, I'm shaken. I'm not claiming I saw a ghost. I'm not saying we're haunted. I'm just saying I saw something I can't easily file away, and it happened in my own bedroom, in the dark, with the person I love sleeping right beside me. And I keep wondering, if it wasn't something normal, then what was it? And if it was something normal, why can't I make it make sense? Hey, so I don't tell this story at parties because it doesn't land as a fun spooky. It lands as a quiet kind of wrong that sticks to you. The house I grew up in was strange. Not quirky strange, more like it had its own mood, and most days, that mood was watching you. We lived right where the neighborhood gave up and the woods started. Thick trees, the kind that swallow sound. And behind our backyard, past a sagging fence and this narrow strip of weeds, there was an old graveyard. Not the tidy kind with fresh flowers and neat rows. This one was hidden, half forgotten. The stones leaned like tired teeth. Some were cracked clean through, and the names on them were worn down until they were just pale scratches. Even in the middle of July, it felt colder back there, like the air didn't belong to the same season. Sometimes, if you stared too long, you'd see something move between the stones. Not a person, more like a shift, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. And every once in a while, when the whole world went still, you'd hear a murmur. Not words you could understand, just the sense of voices, like a radio turned low in another room. We didn't talk about it, not really. It was one of those family understandings. Don't invite it into conversation. And the house itself didn't exactly make you feel brave either. Lights would flicker even after my mom replaced the bulbs. Doors would ease open by themselves, slow and careful, like someone trying not to be noticed. Things would disappear. My dad's keys, a hairbrush, a stuffed animal, and then turn up in places that made no sense, like the linen closet or the basement stairs. My parents tried to be normal about it. Drafts, old wiring. We're all just tired, that kind of thing. But then there was one night that flipped the whole house into something else. So we had this routine. After dinner, we'd pile into the living room and watch sitcoms, comfort TV, stuff with laugh tracks. That kind of noise that makes you feel like nothing bad can happen because, see, people are laughing. I was little enough that I'd always fall asleep during the second episode. I'd curl up at the end of the couch with this faded quilt and knock out like a rock. My parents would let me stay there. No point waking me up, right? And then they'd head to bed. And here's the thing. I had a habit. I'd wake up later, usually when the TV had gone off and the house was dark and quiet. That moment would hit me. I'm alone. And I'd bolt down the hallway to my parents' room. At the foot of their bed, my dad kept this old army green trunk from his college days. It smelled like dust and cedar and metal. I'd use it like a step, climb up, and worm my way between them. It was automatic, like my body knew the path better than my brain did. But that night, even before I fell asleep, something felt off. The sitcom was on, people were joking, but the laughter didn't feel like it could reach the corners of the room. The air felt thick, like breathing through a warm towel. I remember feeling uneasy and not knowing why. Still, I drifted off. Later, this is what my parents told me. Both of them woke up to a sound. Soft, small, that quick little pitter-patter of feet on the hallway floor. At first, my mom thought it was just me, half asleep and padding down the hall like always. My dad mumbled something and rolled over. But then the footsteps got closer, and the sound had that weird clarity it only gets at night, when the whole house is holding its breath. The footsteps stopped right outside their door, and then the door creaked, slowly, like a careful hand was pushing it open. My mom, still drowsy, called out, "Mia, honey, come on, get in bed." No climbing, no little grunt of effort, no quilt rustling, nothing. So she tried again, more awake this time. "Mia, stop messing around and get up here." And then she felt it. This is the part that makes my skin prickle, even now. She felt a slow shift in the mattress, like weight pressing down along the side of the bed, not at the foot where I usually climbed, like something was pulling itself up, carefully, deliberately, too slow, too quiet. My dad sat up, suddenly sharp with panic because he felt it too, and he snapped, like parents do when fear comes out as anger. "Mia, you have 5 seconds to get in this bed." And then they looked, down toward the foot of the bed where the trunk was, and there was something. Low to the ground, on all fours, a shape in the darkness that looked like a child-sized silhouette, crouched and still, like it had been caught in the act of watching. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing loud enough to hear. It was just there, too perfectly placed, too perfectly wrong. My mom says the room felt colder in that exact second, like someone had opened a freezer door. My dad, fully awake now, lunged for the lamp and snapped it on. Light flooded the room, and the shadow was gone. Just gone, like it had never existed. They jumped out of bed and tore the room apart, looked under the bed, threw open the closet, checked behind the curtains. My mom even yanked open the bathroom door like I could have been standing in there silently, waiting to laugh. But there was nothing. No child. No prank. No explanation. So they ran, barefoot, hearts hammering, down the hallway to the living room. And there I was, still asleep on the couch, curled under that faded quilt, face turned into the cushion, breathing slow and peaceful like I hadn't moved in hours. My parents just stood there for a long time, staring at me like they needed to make sure I was real, like they needed proof that I was where I was supposed to be. My dad finally whispered, "Then who was in our room?" No one answered, because what do you even say to that? And after that night, everything changed in this tiny, quiet way. They didn't announce it. They didn't sit me down and explain anything. They just stopped leaving me alone in the living room. If I fell asleep, one of them carried me to bed. Every time. Like they were afraid the hallway might walk again. And this time, it might not be pretending to be me. Okay, so, picture this. It's Samhain night here in Ireland. That kind of cold, quiet dark, where even the streetlights feel like they're... I was 15, and I was with my 2 cousins, Liam and Kieran. and we had the brilliant idea of sneaking out around 2:40 a.m. to walk down to the little shop for snacks. Stupid, I know, but it felt harmless at the time, like a tiny adventure. Everything's fine on the way there. No cars, no people, just our footsteps and us trying not to laugh too loud. And then we're heading back, and when we're maybe a third of the way home, we pass this old stone church. You know the kind. Dark windows, tall shadows, the whole place looking like it's been watching you for 100 years. That's when Liam goes, really casually, lads, there's a woman there. I glance over and I see her, an elderly woman, maybe late 60s or early 70s, with this curly dark hair that fell just past her shoulders, and she's holding a shopping bag like she's just been out doing her groceries. At nearly 3 in the morning, which already makes 0 sense. We keep walking, trying not to stare. At first we're like, maybe she's just walking the same direction. So we keep going, normal pace, pretending we're not bothered. A few minutes pass and Kieran leans in close to me and says, quiet but sharp, "Mate, she's following us." So I turn my head, just a quick look over my shoulder, and yeah, she's behind us. Same distance, same pace, not wandering, not stopping, just tracking. My stomach drops in that way where your whole body goes cold for a second. We start walking faster, but not too fast, because in our heads we're thinking, don't look like you're scared, don't make it obvious. So we do this awkward speed walk thing, trying to act casual while our hearts are hammering. And then, no warning at all, she starts running. Not like jogging, running, straight at us. I swear, in that moment, it didn't matter how old she looked. All I knew was it was almost 3 in the morning on Samhain. We're by a church, and an elderly woman was sprinting toward a bunch of teenagers like she meant business. We absolutely lost it. All 3 of us just bolted. We're running full speed, breath catching in our throats, shoes slapping the road, and every couple seconds I'm risking a glance back, and she's still coming, still running. Then, just as suddenly, she veers off and runs into this yard, my nan's place. And that part is what made it feel wrong. Because my nan is the only person living there. It's not like it's some busy house where someone might be coming and going. It's quiet, empty looking, and this woman just disappears in there like she belongs. We didn't stop to investigate. We didn't even slow down. We got home, slammed the door, and just stood in the hallway trying to catch our breath, looking at each other like, did that actually happen? And then, because we're idiots and we wanted to make it worse, we start searching for what it could have been. We end up asking an AI about it, and it starts going on about the witching hour, spirits, and then it mentions banshees, how sometimes they appear as older women, sometimes they follow people as a warning, like a sign you're not meant to be doing something, or that someone close by is about to die. And I know how that sounds. I do. It's easy to roll your eyes at it when you're sitting somewhere warm in daylight. But here's the thing. So yeah, maybe it was just an old woman out late. Maybe she was confused or heading somewhere. Or we misread everything because we were tired and already spooked because it was Samhain. But I can't shake the questions. Why was she out at that hour with a bag like that? Why follow 3 teenagers in silence? And why, of all things, run at us? I don't know what I believe, honestly. I just know it didn't feel normal. It felt like we brushed past something we weren't meant to see, and it noticed us back. So, this happened a while back, but it still pops into my head sometimes, especially when I'm driving. I figured I'd tell you and see what you make of it. At the time, I was unemployed and just waiting to ship out to boot camp, late November. But you know how it is. Life doesn't pause just because you're in between chapters. Bills still show up on time. So I'd been doing DoorDash deliveries in my old pickup to keep things afloat. And honestly, that job was eye-opening. The tips, especially for long trips, can be downright insulting. Like, you're out there burning gas and time for pocket change. Anyway, one afternoon I got an order for this little Mexican place. The funny part is it was super close to where I lived, like a couple streets over. I pulled up and had to wait because the order wasn't ready yet. While I'm sitting there, I'm like, I should call my mom. We hadn't talked in a bit, and I have that bad habit of getting caught up in my own stuff and forgetting to check in, then feeling guilty after. So I call her, and we're just chatting, nothing serious. I've got my window cracked because it was warm out, and all of a sudden I hear someone yelling for help. But here's the thing, it wasn't a panic scream. It was weirdly calm, like steady and controlled. Just help, 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 over and over. I tell my mom, like, hold on, I think someone's calling for help. And she kind of laughs a little, like I'm being dramatic. And she's like, probably some guy messing around. But I don't know. Something about it bothered me. And I'm familiar with that little area. Behind the restaurant, there's this drainage ditch that runs along the back of the buildings. Not super deep, but definitely the kind of place someone could fall or get stuck if they were drunk or hurt. What messed with me most was nobody else seemed to notice. People were walking in and out of the restaurant like it was just another normal day. No heads turning, no, did you hear that? Nothing. Then my phone buzzes. Order's ready. I get out of my truck and I'm thinking, okay, food in a second. Let me just make sure nobody's actually in trouble. So instead of going straight inside, I start walking toward where I think the voice is coming from, toward the side of the building, closer to the ditch. And that's when I noticed this guy sitting on the curb near the corner. From where I was, I honestly didn't think he was the one yelling. I figured he was just some dude taking a smoke break, minding his business. Also, I'm not gonna lie, my eyesight isn't great, so at first I couldn't make out his face clearly. But as I get closer, the help starts sounding more urgent, less calm, more hungry almost, like it's trying harder. And then it clicks. It's him. He's the one calling out. And the second my brain catches up, my vision catches up too, and I realize he's turned toward me, watching me, like he'd been waiting for someone to come over. Not waving, not gesturing like I'm hurt, just sitting there, locked in on me, calling help like it's a fishing line. I got this cold rush down my back, like my body decided for me that this was wrong. And the whole time my mom is still on the phone like, what's going on? Are you okay? And I'm trying to sound calm, but I'm not calm. I'm walking back toward the restaurant entrance, and behind me, his voice changes. Now it's not steady, help, help. Now it's pleading, like crying, like, no, wait, help. Like I'm abandoning him. And I know how that sounds. I know. But every part of me was screaming, don't go back. Don't get closer. Don't get pulled into whatever this is. I've seen enough movies, and honestly, heard enough real-life stories to know that someone needs help can be the oldest trap in the book. So I go inside, grab the order, do the whole polite customer service thing like my heart isn't trying to climb out of my ribs. Then I walk back out. And the second I step outside, silence. No yelling, no crying, nothing. I get in my truck, still weirded out, still curious, and I'm like, okay, I just have to know if he's still there. So instead of driving off normally, I loop around the corner to look back at the spot. And he's gone. Just gone. Like he evaporated. Now, here's the part I wrestle with. I used to hear people talk about skinwalkers and creepy mimic stuff and all that, and I'd roll my eyes. I always leaned logical. It's probably this, Probably that. My cousin's girlfriend used to swear she saw things in the woods once when her car broke down, and I'd listen, but I didn't really buy it. Didn't help that I owned this little death whistle I picked up years ago on a trip, and I'd mess around with it out in the trees to freak my friends out. She used to tell me, "You're inviting something messing with you." And I'd laugh like, "Yeah, okay." But that day, in the middle of the afternoon, with people around, the way that voice stayed calm until it didn't, the way he was watching me, the way it felt like he wanted me closer. I don't know. I'm not saying it was something supernatural. I'm not even saying he wasn't a real person. I'm just saying my instincts hit the alarm so hard it felt physical. And I've learned to respect that. So yeah, that's my story. Tell me, have you ever had a moment like that? Where something felt off in a way you couldn't explain, and your body was like, "Nope, leave, now." Okay, I've gone back and forth on whether to say this out loud because I know how it sounds. But I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened, the way I remember it, messy details and all, because keeping it bottled up has been eating at me. It was October 11th, sometime this year. I remember that part clearly because I'd been checking the date on my phone earlier, like I always do when my sleep is off. I went to bed a little after midnight, and I just couldn't settle. You know that feeling where your mind won't stop pacing, even though your body is begging for rest? That was me. And then, out of nowhere, I noticed this white light outside the window. At first it was just a glow, like a car had pulled up with headlights pointed directly at the glass. But it kept growing. Brighter, bigger, until it wasn't outside anymore. Everything was flooded with it. The whole room looked like it had been dropped under some impossible spotlight, brighter than daylight, brighter than it should have been able to get. And that's when my body started doing something I can't really compare to anything normal. A tingling ran through me, like electricity, but not painful. More like that heavy pins and needles feeling when your arm falls asleep, except it spread through my arms, legs, chest, everywhere. I realized I couldn't move, not even a finger. I was completely locked in place. But I was awake, fully awake. That's the part that sticks. I wasn't drifting. I wasn't dreaming. I was there. The light got so intense I couldn't see anything at all. Just whiteness. And time got weird. It might have been 10 seconds. It might have been 10 minutes. I honestly couldn't tell. Then, slowly, the brightness eased, and suddenly I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I was sitting in this cold, hard metal chair in a room that was this soft, pale blue, like the color of early morning before the sun's up. And the strangest thing was the lighting. There weren't lamps, no ceiling lights, no shadows really. It was like the room itself glowed from every surface at once. And across from me, close enough that it felt intimate, like a conversation distance, there was someone. Something. If you've ever seen those stereotypical drawings of a gray, yeah, it was like that, but more refined? Not cute, not cartoonish. His face looked almost sculpted, like sharp cheekbones and a stronger structure than the stories usually describe. Deep-set, dark eyes, a small, squared-off nose, a thin mouth that barely moved when he spoke, like he didn't need to. And listen, this is important. I'm not a brave person. I'm anxious. I overthink everything. If I hear a noise in another room, I'm the kind of person who convinces myself something's wrong. But in that moment, I felt calm. Not drugged, not numb, just no fear. Like the part of me that panics had been gently turned down. He started speaking, but not in English. He tried a few languages first, several, one after another, like he was scrolling through options. I didn't understand them, but a couple sounded faintly familiar, like echoes of something I'd heard on TV or in passing. Then he spoke English, clear, measured, like he already knew I'd understand it. And he said my name. Not hey, not human, not anything vague. My actual name, like we'd met before. That alone made my stomach flip. He said something like, welcome, and told me he had something important to share. Then, this is going to sound ridiculous, but it happened. He asked if I was comfortable, like he cared whether the chair was digging into my back. I answered because what else do you do? I told him I was fine, and I asked who he was and why I was there. He paused for a long time, long enough that I started wondering if he'd even respond. Then he said, very simply, and I remember this wave of confusion, like my brain tripped over the sentence and couldn't recover. Then he said the message. He told me my planet, our planet, was in danger. Not in a vague, be kind to the earth way, but in a direct, heavy way that landed like a weight in my chest. He said that if we didn't act soon, extreme weather would become normal. More violent storms, more brutal heat, wildfires that wouldn't stop, drought that would crack whole regions open. And then he said something that made my mouth go dry. He said that if we don't change course, the world would slide into a nuclear conflict in the late 2020s. He didn't give an exact date the way you'd expect in a movie, but he was specific enough to make it feel real. He described a future where only a small number of people survive, forced underground, living like we'd taken a knife to civilization and left only the roots. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to that? My first instinct was honestly, this has to be a dream. It was too sharp, too cinematic, too impossible. But I managed to ask him where he was from, where they were from, and he said, Earth. He told me they had traveled through space and time, not for conquest, not for curiosity, but to try to redirect what they were living through, to prevent their reality from solidifying into ours, like they were grabbing at the steering wheel before the crash. And then he said something that felt aimed straight at my heart. He told me I wasn't the only one, that many people had been contacted in different places, in different ways. And he said, almost like a plea, don't fail us. Don't fail yourselves. That's when I finally said what I'd been thinking the whole time. I told him, you've got the wrong person. I said I'm nobody. I don't have power. I'm not important. I'm not connected to anything. I'm not a leader. I'm not influential. I'm just a person trying to get through life. He didn't argue. He didn't reassure me. He just looked at me, steady, patient, like he already knew I'd say that. So I asked him one last thing. I said, what do I call you? I asked his name, and he answered with a single word, Elias. After that, he didn't speak again. He just kept watching me, eyes like deep water, while the pale blue room grew brighter and brighter, like the light was swelling from inside the walls. The brightness rose until it swallowed everything, and then I was home. Not in bed, in my living room, barely dressed, just my shorts like I'd been dragged out of sleep and dropped somewhere else. And my first panicked thought was, how long was I gone? So I looked at the clock. And this is the part that still makes my skin prickle. It was earlier, not later. Earlier by hours, like time had snapped backward, like whatever happened had been folded and placed back before it began. I stood there for a long time just listening to my own breathing, trying to decide if I was going to cry or laugh or throw up. And that's why I'm telling you. Not because I expect you to believe me automatically, not because I want attention. I'm saying it because it happened to me, and I can't carry it alone anymore. And because he told me, I'm not the only one. So if any of this sounds familiar to you, if you've had your own bright light or missing time, or woke up somewhere you shouldn't have been, I'd really like to hear from you. So, growing up, my older sister Maya and I had this phase where we were obsessed with the Ouija board. We weren't the type to pull it out once at a sleepover and giggle and forget about it. We played with it constantly, like way too often. And even then, I never really knew if it was real, or if I was just feeding my own imagination because I loved anything spooky. Ghost shows, spirit stories, all of it. People warned me, of course, but I didn't care. I was curious in that reckless teenage way where you think you're untouchable. One afternoon, after we'd been using it almost every day for weeks, the planchette slid across the board and spelled out something that made the air feel cold. It said, "Soon you will be me, and I will be you." Maya went pale, like instantly. She shoved the board away so hard it nearly tipped off the bed, and she swore she was done. No more, not ever again. And I tried to laugh it off, but I didn't forget it. It sat in the back of my mind like a splinter you can't stop touching. And the thing is, our house already felt off sometimes, like it had moods. My granddad, everyone called him Pops, came to visit around then. He wasn't dramatic. He was the kind of guy who'd roll his eyes at scary movies and tell you to stop being silly. But after a couple nights, he cornered my mom in the kitchen and told her, dead serious, that the house was haunted. He said something yanked the blanket clean off him while he was sleeping. Not like it slipped, like it was pulled. Then there was our dog, Buddy. Sweet dog, brave about everything else. But one day he hit the hallway and just stopped. Stiff, trembling, ears pinned back. He refused to walk through like there was an invisible wall. We tried coaxing him, calling him, even shaking treats. Nothing. He just backed away, whining like he couldn't help it. And I had my own moments. The kind you don't tell people because you don't want to sound dramatic. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with that awful certainty that something was right there. One time I felt the mattress shaking, like someone was gripping the frame and rattling it. Small, fast movements, enough to make the springs quiver. I remember lying there frozen, staring at the dark, trying to convince myself it was a passing truck or something. But it didn't feel like that. It felt intentional. Then there was the morning in the bathroom. No one was home. I know that because I'd watched my mom pull out of the driveway, and Maya was at a friend's place. I was brushing my hair, half awake, when I heard sounds from the kitchen, clear as day. Cupboards opening and shutting, a chair scraping, plastic bags rustling like someone was digging through groceries. Normal, everyday sounds, except I was alone. My heart did that horrible drop, like it fell straight into my stomach. I crept out, peeked down the hall, and then, without even thinking, I ran. I bolted into my mom's room and shoved myself into the corner by the wardrobe, shaking, waiting for footsteps, waiting for someone to come down the hall. I stayed there until I heard my mom's car crunch into the driveway. The second I knew she was home, I ran into the kitchen, ready to tell her someone had been inside. But it was spotless, quiet. No open cupboards, no moved chairs, no one, just nothing. The worst one happened on a school morning a couple weeks later. I was making my lunch in the kitchen. Our kitchen opened into the laundry room, and the doorway was right behind me. I was half focused, moving on autopilot, when I felt this breath, warm, close, and then a whisper right in my ear. My name. Not faint, not imagined. Loud enough that I flinched and spun around, and it sounded exactly like Maya. I ran to Maya's room and burst in, still crying, barely able to talk. She was asleep, fully asleep, messy hair, face squished into the pillow. She jolted awake to me standing there falling apart, and she looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And even if she had been awake, there's no way she could have gotten behind me in the kitchen, whispered right into my ear, and vanished without me seeing her. The layout didn't allow it. I would have noticed. I would have heard her footsteps. Anything. That was the point where I stopped pretending it was all just my imagination. Not long after, my grandma, Nana Jo, took me to see a psychic. I didn't really know what I expected. I just wanted someone to look me in the eyes and tell me I wasn't crazy. The psychic got quiet, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. And then she told me the presence around me wasn't a stranger. She said it was connected to my sister, specifically, a twin who didn't make it. A baby who was lost before Maya was born. And she told me, very gently, that this twin had stayed close, especially to me. Like I was the one who could feel her the most. I remember Nana squeezing my hand so tightly, like she was anchoring me to the room. A few months later, Nana got sick. It moved so fast it didn't feel real. Cancer. And then suddenly we were talking in weeks, not years. We only really understood how serious it was about a month before she passed. And then she was gone. She died on September 11th. I'll never forget that date for 100 reasons. But that year it became personal in a way I wasn't prepared for. A couple weeks after the funeral, I was in my room and reached up to pull a random book off the shelf. My fingers slipped and it dropped, thudding onto the floor and flipping open by itself. It landed on a page talking about 9/11. Just open. Like the book had chosen the exact spot to show me. I stood there staring at it with my stomach twisting, because it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like that same invisible presence saying, "I'm still here. I see you." And then, this is where the story changes tone, I swear. After Nana died, this little bird came into our lives in the most random way. Not planned. Not something we'd been looking for. It was like he just arrived. We named him Sunny because he honestly changed the atmosphere of the whole house. He was small, loud, stubborn, ridiculously affectionate. He'd perch on my shoulder like he belonged there. He'd tilt his head at me like he understood every word. When I cried, he'd climb closer, no hesitation, like his entire job was to be near me. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this. When Sunny came into our home, it was like the haunting stopped. The house went quiet. Not empty quiet, but peaceful quiet. No more bed shaking, no more whispers, no more footsteps where there shouldn't be any. Nothing. Sunny got us through grief in a way I didn't know an animal could. He taught me what real comfort felt like, what unconditional love felt like. I didn't just love him, I trusted him. He was my best friend in the purest, simplest sense. Years passed, and then, this part still makes my chest tighten. On the week that marked 10 years since Nana died, Sunny was gone. Just like that. As quickly as he'd come into our lives, he left them. And I know how that sounds. I know birds don't live forever. I know there are logical explanations for everything. But the timing was so exact, so eerily aligned with that anniversary, that it felt like a message. Like Nana had sent him when we were drowning, and then took him back when she knew we could finally stand on our own. But I know what I lived through. And I know that in that strange, heavy house, after years of fear and unanswered questions, love showed up with feathers, perched right on my shoulder, and somehow made everything quiet again. So, when I was really little, like 3 or 4, my family lived in this older city where there were tons of historic homes, the kind built back in the late 1800s. Our place was one of those houses. It was officially historic enough that there were public records on it, and, no joke, it even got mentioned on this local historical tour route. Upstairs, there was this one room that always felt colder than the rest of the house. Like, noticeably colder. My parents said it was because the room had been added on later and didn't have great insulation. which might be true, I guess. But even as a kid, it felt different. Not just chilly, kind of still. The room was small and square, and it stuck out from the side of the house, so it had windows on 3 walls. Bright during the day, but the cold never really left. That room was my playroom, so all my toys were in there. Blocks, toy cars, stuffed animals, the whole thing. And here's where it gets weird. I used to tell my parents that a little girl would come play with me. I wasn't scared. It was just normal, the way kids accept things. I told them she was about my age and that she had dark hair, like a soft brown, and she wore this white dress with puffed sleeves, kind of like something you'd see in an old-fashioned photo. The part that made my parents raise their eyebrows, though, was that I insisted she came in through the window. Through the window. On the 2nd floor. I can still imagine myself saying it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like, yeah, she comes in right there. Pointing like it was a front door. My parents probably just assumed I had a big imagination and left it at that. Not too long after, maybe a year later, we moved. New house, new city, completely different life. And at some point, my parents started putting together a scrapbook about the old house because it was one of those places with a whole paper trail. They'd gathered copies of documents and old newspaper clippings, stuff from public records, articles about the neighborhood, even a couple old photos. One afternoon, my mom was sitting there flipping through it, and I was nearby, half paying attention the way little kids do. And she stops on this old newspaper clipping about the first family who owned the house. There was a photo with it, grainy, black and white, one of those stiff family portraits. And I remember just looking at it. Then I pointed at one of the kids in the picture, the daughter, and I told my mom, really calmly, like I was stating a fact, "That's the girl who used to play with me." Apparently my mom went completely quiet, like the air in the room changed. Because I wasn't guessing, and I wasn't asking, I was sure. I didn't say, "She looks like her," or "That might be her." I said it like I was recognizing someone I knew. I'm older now, obviously, but that memory still gives me this strange, tight feeling in my chest when I think about it. It's not even fear. It's more like a kind of awe, like, what was that? Because I was too young to connect any dots, and I definitely hadn't been told anything about some little girl from the house's history. A few days ago, I was with my family for Thanksgiving, and we were reminiscing about old times, and that story came up again. And it reminded me, this is one of only 2 big, I can't explain it, things that have ever happened to me. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about a handful of my weird, other side encounters, and I swear, these weren't just regular nightmares. You know how a normal bad dream fades after you wake up? These didn't. They stuck to me, like a residue, like my body remembered it even when my brain wanted to rationalize it away. This all started a couple years back when my ex, Mikhail, and I moved into this little apartment. We stayed there about a year together, and then we broke up. After that, I lived there alone for several months with my dog, Biscuit, and that's when things got consistent. Like, every day consistent. And I'll say something that might sound strange. I never got the feeling it was evil. It was more like unsettled. Like something was trying to be noticed. I'd had spooky stuff happen before, like the old house creaks and vibes kind of thing. Mikhail's family had this farmhouse where multiple people, him, his mom, even his grandma, had seen and heard things. So I always had that mindset of, okay, weird stuff happens sometimes. But I really did not expect anything to lock onto me in my own place. The first big moment I remember clearly happened when my friend Lena was over late. She stayed over a lot because she hated going home in the dark, and honestly, she always said my apartment felt creepy. Not haunted mansion creepy, more like someone is standing too close behind you creepy. One night, it was around 11ish, we're on the couch watching some show, laughing, talking, totally normal. The apartment layout was super open. No real doors except the bathroom. From the couch, you could see the beginning of this short hallway that led to the bathroom door. The bedroom was opposite, and the kitchen was off to the side. So if something moved through that little hallway area, you'd catch it out of the corner of your eye. And then we heard it. Heavy running, like someone sprinting, from the bedroom toward the kitchen. Not a little shuffle, not pipes, not the building settling. It sounded like actual feet charging across the floor. And at the exact same time, both of us saw it. This quick black shape, like a shadow that didn't belong to anything, flash through that hallway and vanish into the kitchen. Lena and I just stared at each other like, did we both just see that? Because that moment where you're trying to decide if you're losing it? Yeah, that. And I don't know why I did this. Maybe because I'm stubborn. Maybe because fear makes me bold for like 5 seconds. But I stood up and walked straight into the kitchen and said, out loud, something like, "Okay, who the hell is here?" Nothing. Empty kitchen. I checked the closet by the front door. This tall, narrow one where, if someone was hiding, they'd have nowhere to go. Nothing. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. Then we did that nervous thing where you laugh too loud and pretend it's funny, because the alternative is admitting you're scared. We joked that we were being dramatic, but we both still remember it to this day. That's how I know it was real. After that, it became little things. Mikhail and I would be in bed, and we'd hear footsteps in the living room, like someone pacing. I'd usually just roll over, face away from the hallway, and do that, if I can't see it, it can't see me. Logic that makes 0 sense but feels comforting. Then one night, this is when I was alone, I heard someone walking right next to the bed, clear as day. Not in the hallway, beside me. Like someone stopped and stood there, right behind my back, watching. And I couldn't turn around. And before you ask, yes, there were neighbors upstairs, but this wasn't that. In that apartment, I barely heard anything from anyone. In my new place, I hear every sneeze and chair scrape from other units, so I know what normal building noise sounds like. This wasn't normal. So then the breakup happened. Mikhail moved out, and it was just me and Biscuit. He was old and sick. Poor thing had heart issues, and he was mostly blind and nearly deaf. Sometimes he'd wake me up at night because he'd have these scary episodes, and I'd have to calm him down and make sure he was okay. He was on medication, but eventually I had to let him go. That part still hurts to even say out loud. But the truly strange part started before that, while I was still alone there. I started having these dreams, and I'm putting that in quotes because I don't know if they were dreams. They felt interactive, like I wasn't just watching something, but participating in something that was happening somewhere else. The first one was almost gentle at first. I dreamed about a girl, around my age in the dream, maybe younger. And in the dream, I took her by the hand and led her back to my apartment. And in my head, it felt normal, because I'm the kind of person who's friendly even in dreams. Like, sure, come on, let's go. In the dream, we got to my bedroom, and I hopped into bed and told her she could use my washing machine, like I was hosting a guest. I pointed at a pile of clothes at the foot of the bed and repeated it. She just stood there, staring at me in this odd way. Not angry, just off. Then I laid my head back down, and this thought hit me like a cold splash. Wait, is this real? I lifted my head up fast, and she was gone. And I woke up with that awful, sinking feeling that someone had been in my space. After that, I started hearing movement in the hallway at night, like footsteps circling around. But it always felt like whatever it was wouldn't come into the bedroom. And honestly, I told myself, Okay, fine. Stay out there. We can coexist. I even started thinking maybe she'd lived there before me or something. Like she just wanted presence, peace. But then the dreams turned into something else. One of them, God, I still remember it, was at my childhood home, specifically the basement. But in the dream, the basement was wrong. Like it had been stretched into a narrow maze, walls too close, corners that didn't exist in real life. And I was running down there to hide, which makes no sense, because basements are the last place you'd hide if you were scared. I'd tuck myself behind a corner, and I could hear her, running, giggling, like it was a game, like hide and seek. And I knew, somehow, she was going to find me. I woke up panicked and sweaty, and the room felt heavy, like the air had been pressed down. Another dream put me in my grandparents' place, and it started normal. Me and Lena hanging out, talking. Then suddenly we'd find family members dead, like they'd been attacked. And then this killer would appear and start chasing me. And the thing is, it felt like a game, like the dream had rules. I could run faster if I decided to run faster, like the world responded to my will. But no matter what I did, I'd get caught. And when I died, it didn't end like a normal nightmare. It would reset, not to the beginning, but to the moment right before I escaped. Like someone was forcing me to replay the chase. And I knew it was her. Even when the face changed, even when it wasn't a girl at all, I knew it was the same presence from my apartment, like she was behind the mask. Then came the worst one, but in this dream, the door was open. And in the shower stood this thing, like a filthy, oversized bunny costume. Not cute, not cartoonish, more like someone stuffed into a grimy mascot suit that had been rotting in a basement. It was just standing there, staring straight at me. And I remember its fingers moving, slowly, like it was testing its hands. Then it tilted its head side to side, like it was curious. I sat up, grabbed Biscuit, like I could protect him with my arms, and I walked toward the bathroom. It was only a few steps, and every step felt like walking through glue. The bunny didn't move. I turned on the bathroom light, and nothing changed. It didn't vanish. It didn't flinch. It just kept staring. I yelled, like actually yelled, "Leave me alone!" And it just stared, like it didn't care. I backed up, went to the bed, and from the corner of my eye, I saw it turn slightly toward the shower and flick the water on and off, like it was playing with the sound. Then I tried to lie down and force myself to sleep, because sometimes you do that when you're overwhelmed. You just try to shut down. And I heard movement on the mattress behind me, like something climbing onto the bed. I whipped around and said, "Stop, I know it's you." And then the bunny suit shifted, like it melted away. And there she was. A girl, maybe 13. Tan skin, long dark hair, brown-black, kind of wavy. And she looked like a real person. Not ghostly, not transparent. Just there, sitting cross-legged like she belonged in my room. That was the first time I really saw her. And she grabbed my hand and pulled, like she wanted me to get out of the bed. I said, "No, I don't want to play. Leave me alone." And she got this annoyed look, like I was ruining her fun. And she said, kind of bluntly, with a slight accent, "I want to get inside the bed." And my whole body went cold. I remember staring at her and asking, "What do you mean, inside the bed?" And for a second she looked embarrassed, like she'd said something too honest. Then she disappeared. I didn't move. I didn't even reach for the light switch, because my brain was convinced if I leaned over the side of the bed, she'd come out from underneath and grab me. After that, I stopped sleeping there as much as I could. I'd crash at friends' places, or nap in my car, or do anything that wasn't being alone in that apartment at night. Every time I walked inside, it had this distinct feeling, like the air remembered. And the wild thing is, once I moved out, it stopped. No more nightmares like that. No more feeling watched. I could sleep again like a normal person. But not forever. A while later, in my new apartment, I had a couple sleep paralysis episodes. And that's the part that messed with my head, because I thought I'd left everything behind. One afternoon, I was taking a nap. My current boyfriend, Jonas, had just left for work. I was half awake, that midday sleep where you can still hear the world. And I heard footsteps approaching the bed from the hallway, and I thought, oh, Jonas must have forgotten something. The footsteps stopped right next to me. I tried to open my eyes just a little, and I saw a shadow standing there, tall, still, and it looked like it had a suitcase, like someone was traveling. I tried to move, couldn't. Tried to speak, couldn't. And then it spoke to me, quiet, right close, and suddenly it was like I was thrown somewhere else. I was on a road at night, alone, and I heard that same voice whisper, "Run." The dream changed multiple times, like flipping channels, but the voice stayed the same. And any time I managed to crack my eyes open, even a sliver, that shadow was still there at the edge of my bed. And when I finally snapped out of it, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was safe. Because that's the thing with these experiences, whether you call them dreams, sleep paralysis, spirits, brain glitches, whatever, your body doesn't care what you label it. It remembers the feeling. And that feeling is exactly what I never want to live with again. So, we've been out on this little rural property for almost 6 years now, and we've had the normal stuff. Wind rattling a gate, possums on the roof, the odd dog barking at a shadow. But nothing like what happened this week. 2 separate nights, 2 totally different kinds of, what on earth was that? And I still don't have a neat explanation for either one. The first night was a few mornings ago, one of those deep, dead hours sleeps where you don't even know what day it is. I remember rolling over and seeing the time glow on my phone, 3:34 a.m. And right then I heard it. 2 knocks. Not a scrape, not a creak. 2 clean, deliberate taps, like someone had knuckles and a plan. The first 2 knocks came from the window in my daughter's room, which is right beside mine. And before I could even sit up all the way, like truly immediately, there were 2 knocks on my window. Then, a beat later, the living room window. 2 knocks again. It's hard to explain how unsettling it was, because it wasn't chaotic. It was organized, like something was moving with intention. There was a short pause, just long enough that my brain tried to jump in and say, okay, maybe it's the house settling. Maybe it's... And then it picked up again, continuing along the next side of the house toward the kitchen windows. And what really got under my skin was the timing. The gap between each set was about a second. A second is nothing. You can't trot around the outside of a house in 1-second jumps, tap, 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 and keep it that precise, especially in the dark. It also wasn't like one window got hammered and then everything went quiet. It was this steady pattern, moving around the house in a clockwise loop, like it was tracing the perimeter. Our garage sits between the living room and kitchen, and I remember thinking, if it's still going in that direction, it would have hit the garage windows too. I just can't hear them from here. And that thought bothered me even more, because it made the pattern feel real in a way I didn't want. And here's another detail I can't get past. Our livestock guardian dogs, big, serious dogs who bark at moths for a living, were silent. No warning barks, no pacing, nothing. Even our motion lights didn't flick on. No porch sensors, no backlights. And it wasn't windy that night either. One of those still, cold nights where sound travels. I was shaken. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't. But I whispered a prayer right there in bed. Simple, steady, asking for protection, asking for peace, asking God to cover the house. And somehow, I eventually drifted back off. The next morning I asked my daughter, let's call her Lila, if she'd heard anything. She looked at me like she wasn't sure she was awake when it happened. She said she remembered hearing knocking, but it felt like she was half dreaming, so she'd convinced herself it wasn't real. And I tried to do the same. I really did. I tried to file it away under rural house noises and move on. But then the second night happened. This one was last night, well, technically early morning. I was asleep next to my partner, let's call him Ethan, when we got jolted awake by our two boys standing in the doorway, wide-eyed and pale. The time was 1:12 a.m. They were both talking at once, but the younger one, Noah, was the most scared. He kept saying something was outside. The older one, Caleb, was trying to sound brave, but I could hear it in his voice too. Their rooms are side by side, further down from ours. Caleb told us he was just about to fall asleep when he heard a voice outside, near Noah's window. And he didn't describe it like an animal sound. He described it like speech. Like someone was talking, but the words weren't words. More like rapid, hollow gibberish. Something that had the cadence of language without being language. Caleb told us he called out for it to leave in God's name, loudly, not whispering. And when it didn't stop, he got up and came straight to us. And as he did, Noah came out too, insisting he heard it clearly as well. And this time, everything outside was alive. The wind was whipping hard, strong enough that you could hear it pushing at the eaves, and the dogs were going insane. Not their normal, there's a cat, bark. This was full-throated, urgent, relentless barking, the kind that says, something is here. Those dogs can see the boys' windows from the paddock, and I remember thinking, they don't bark like this at wind. We didn't waste time. Ethan and I went straight into Noah's room, and we knelt right there. No fancy speech, no performance, just prayer. Calm, firm, covering him, asking God to fill that room with peace. And I'm telling you, within seconds, the barking stopped. Not faded, not slowed, stopped. And the wind did the same thing, like someone turned it off. The sudden quiet was almost louder than the noise had been. After that, Ethan, Caleb, and I went outside. We didn't go wandering around the yard or chasing anything. We stayed near the house and prayed out loud, asking anything that wasn't of God to leave, telling it had no place on our property, speaking the name of Jesus and asking for the Lord's protection over every side of the home. We walked the perimeter, front, back, both sides, praying as we went. Not in panic, more like planting a flag. Like, no, this is our home. These are our children. You are not welcome here. When we came back inside, we kept praying. I went back to Noah and prayed over him again because he was shaking, trying to be tough because he's a teenager now, but you could see it in his eyes. That kind of fear sits in the body. We stayed awake until around 3:40 a.m., just checking the house, checking the kids, listening. Nothing else happened after that. At least, nothing we noticed. And look, I know how this sounds. We're not a family that's dabbling in spooky stuff. We don't mess with new age practices or try to chase experiences. We're pretty straightforward. We read the Bible, we pray, we try to live clean and kind and steady. We're not perfect, but we're not inviting darkness in or going looking for it. That's why this has rattled me so much. because both incidents happened outside the house, and I'm grateful for that. I truly am. I feel deep down that God has been protecting us, but I don't want any of it lingering. I don't want activity. I don't want conversation with it. I don't want curiosity leading us anywhere. I just want our home to be quiet again, normal again. I keep circling back to the first night and trying to explain it away. Maybe cold contraction, maybe the siding, maybe, I don't know. But the pattern was so directional, so methodical. And after living here this long without anything like it, it's hard to shrug off. And my biggest ache is for Noah. He's the one who looks like he's carrying it in his chest today, like he's bracing for it to happen again. So yeah, that's where we're at. 2 nights, 2 different kinds of disturbances, a house that suddenly felt like it was being tested at the edges, and I'm left with this quiet question I can't shake. Has anyone else ever gone through something like this? Something you can't quite explain, that seems to press right up against your home, but not cross in? So, this is something only my mom and I have known for a long time. I never even told my partner. Not because I thought people would laugh, more because once you say something out loud, it starts to feel real in a way you can't take back. But I'm older now, and I think I'm finally ready to share it. Back in 2011, right after I finished high school, my mom and I moved into this quiet little place in rural Alabama. Deep trees, long gravel drive, the kind of silence that makes you feel like the world has stopped hurrying. I've always liked living out where you don't have neighbors close enough to hear you sneeze. Peace feels like space, you know? The first couple months were off, but in a way you could shrug at. Stuff would end up in the wrong spot. A door would creak like someone had just pushed it and walked away. Once or twice, I swear I heard my name called. Soft, like it came from the hallway. But when I answered, there was only air and stillness. It got harder to shrug off by early 2012. That's when it started happening to me when I was alone. I'd suddenly black out, just gone. And when I came to, I'd be on the couch or the floor like my body had decided to power down without asking permission. Then the blackouts turned into sleep paralysis. If you've never experienced it, I'm genuinely glad. It's like waking up inside your own body while the rest of you refuses to cooperate. You can see, you can hear, you can think, but you can't move. And every instinct in you is screaming that you're not alone. Because I started seeing something. Not a monster, not a demon with horns, nothing dramatic like that. Just a person-shaped darkness. Average height, no details, no face. Like someone cut a human outline out of the light. I started calling it hollow, because it didn't look like a shadow cast by anything. It looked like the absence of something. And hollow always kept its distance. It would show up while I was locked in place, stand just inside my view, and then, almost calmly, walk away. And once it left, I'd be able to move again like it had been holding the lock and then decided to release it. My mom and I did the practical stuff first. Carbon monoxide detectors, because the house was old and we weren't about to ignore something that could actually kill us. Nothing. Normal readings. Then I went to a sleep specialist. They poked, prodded, ran their tests, asked me about stress and caffeine and screen time. Everything came back fine. And here's what messed with my head the most. I stayed at my girlfriend's place for weeks at one point, and nothing happened. Not a single blackout. Not one episode. But the first night back in that house, hollow came right back, like it had been waiting for me to step over the threshold. After a while, I noticed a pattern. No matter where I fell asleep, bed, couch, recliner, whenever hollow appeared, it always walked in the same direction. Like it had a destination. Like it was trying to show me something, but could only do it in this weird, sideways way. And then came the day I can still replay in my mind like a video. It was a Saturday in mid-September, September 8th, 2012, I'm pretty sure. Late morning, around 10ish. I took our dog out for a quick walk, just down the edge of the woods where the trees start crowding in. Halfway through, I felt that heavy, drowsy wave hit me out of nowhere, the way it always did right before something happened. Then I heard a rustle deeper in the brush. I turned, expecting a deer, or honestly, I was half worried it was a bear. Instead, between the trees, I saw it. That same human-shaped dark figure, standing there in daylight like it didn't care about the rules. I got us back inside fast, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat on the couch, trying to slow my breathing. I remember thinking, okay, if this happens again, I'm done running from it. And right then, like I'd flipped a switch, my body locked up. Sleep paralysis. Hollow was there, in the doorway area, and it did what it always did. It turned and walked toward that same part of the house, and something in me snapped from fear into frustration. Because what was I supposed to do? Just keep watching it stroll off like it owned the place? Over the next few days, I searched around the area it always headed toward. Behind furniture, closets, corners, under the stairs. Nothing. I'd still get the occasional episode, still get the sense of being watched, but Hollow didn't show itself again for a little bit. Then, one Monday evening in early October, I pulled into the driveway and just sat there with the engine off, staring at the house like it was a puzzle that refused to be solved. And I remembered something. The house had a cellar. Not a nice basement, more like this cramped, brick-lined space you accessed from a door we basically treated like it didn't exist. My mom had gone down there once and swore she saw this massive shed skin near the entrance. She backed out and never went farther. So, being the genius that I am, I decided that was where I needed to go. I put on extra layers even though it was warm and sticky outside, because if something bit me down there, I wanted at least a fighting chance. Grabbed a flashlight, opened the cellar door. The smell hit first. Damp dirt, old brick, time. The cellar walls were this pale gray brick, and the floor was just earth. I remember thinking, there is no way this was built to code, and then immediately thinking, of course it wasn't. This is rural Alabama. You had to crouch the whole time to move around down there, which made everything feel tighter, heavier, like the space was pressing down on you. I found old canned food, rusted, dusty, definitely not something anyone should eat. I found the giant snake skin my mom mentioned and tried not to imagine what had been inside it. No snakes, thankfully. But then I found something else, a little section tucked into one corner that felt separate, like a smaller room inside the cellar. And the second my flashlight landed on it, my stomach dropped. Because I knew, with the kind of certainty you don't get from logic, that this was where Hollow had been walking to every time, like it had been pointing at this spot over and over. So I went closer, slow, trying not to trip in the dirt, and I leaned in. At first glance, it looked like storage. A few small boxes, random junk, nothing dramatic. But I hauled the boxes up into the house anyway, set them on the living room floor, and started going through them one by one. Decorations, old toys, clothes that smelled like cardboard and years. A couple books, stuff like a dictionary and an old science textbook. And then I found it. A diary. It was dated 1987. I sat there flipping through it, expecting maybe a few scribbles, maybe some names, some teenage crushes, some "I hate my parents" type stuff. And honestly, that was in there. There were pages about sneaking out, getting grounded, arguing with her mom. One entry made me laugh because she wrote about going to Huntsville with friends to see a rock concert and acting like it was the most important night in human history. It felt so normal, so human. until I reached the end. The last entries weren't dramatic. They were quiet, heavy in a way teenage writing usually isn't. She wrote that her mother had died earlier that year, and that they were moving out soon. And that was it. No big goodbye, no the end, just a door closing. Later that night, I did something I didn't plan. I looked toward the hallway and spoke out loud, feeling ridiculous, but doing it anyway. I said something like, "Did you live here? Are you trying to show me this?" And I waited, almost expecting my body to lock up again. But nothing happened. Not that night, not the next night, not for months. The house got quieter. Things stopped going missing. No more doors creaking open. No more hearing our names whispered from empty rooms. I started to convince myself it was over. Then, in early 2013, I came home late one night after a brutal day. College stress, relationship problems, the kind of day where you feel like you've been carrying a heavy box and somebody just keeps adding weight to it. I crashed on the couch without even changing clothes. At some point, I heard a small sound, like a drawer shifting. And then it happened again. Sleep paralysis. Hollow was standing near the dining area, that same calm stillness about it. It walked over to a dresser we'd shoved some of the cellar stuff into, and, right in front of me, the top drawer slid open. Hollow didn't look at me, didn't threaten me, just opened the drawer like it was finishing a task. Then it walked away. And the second I could move, I sat up so fast my head spun and I pulled the drawer open. There, sitting right on top, was the diary, like it had been placed there with intention. I don't know why, but in that moment, I felt something shift, like the fear was replaced by this strange sense of responsibility. So I did what I could do in the modern world. I searched her name online, found an old profile, found a relative. It turned out she'd passed away years earlier, but I managed to get in touch with her son. We met up in a public place, and I brought the diary, along with a few of the other items from the boxes. He looked at the stuff like he was seeing pieces of his childhood he didn't know were missing. He told me his mom had lived in that house for years. She died there suddenly, an aneurysm. He said they'd cleared out what they could afterward, but some things must have been left behind, forgotten in the cellar. When he asked if he could take the diary and the belongings, I didn't hesitate. I handed it over like it was never mine to keep. I went home that night, and I'm not exaggerating when I say the air in the house felt different. Lighter. Still rural quiet. Still creaks and settling noises like any old place, but the wrongness was gone. After that, I never passed out again. Never had sleep paralysis again. Never saw Hollow again. No whispers. No doors moving on their own. No footsteps that made you turn your head. Just peace. And I still don't know what Hollow was. Was it her? Was it her mother? Was it just my mind stitching together fear and coincidence until it found a story that fit? All I know is this. Something in that house wanted that diary found. And once it was returned, whatever had been lingering there finally let go. It's 2024 now. I don't live there anymore, and neither does my mom. She never saw Hollow the way I did, but she'll tell you, without hesitation, that the house was strange until it wasn't. And even after all these years, part of me still wonders if it wasn't a haunting at all. Maybe it was just someone trying, in the only way they could, to make sure their story didn't stay buried in the dark. So, years back, I ended up inheriting this older house. Nothing fancy, just one of those places with good bones and a long list of, we'll fix it eventually. And my parents, they'd lived there for a while, but they always stayed in the master bedroom when they visited. There was this one room they never, ever slept in, but they never told me anything weird about it. No warnings, no, by the way, nothing. Just normal home stuff. Repairs, replacements, that kind of thing. When I first moved in, I didn't realize something important about myself. How do I explain this without sounding dramatic? I've had a near-death experience. Actually, I was brought back, and ever since then, it's like my senses are tuned differently. Certain places feel louder to me, not with sound, but with energy, a presence, a heaviness. But back then, I didn't connect any of that. And honestly, we were skeptics. Like, truly. We were the kind of people who rolled our eyes at ghost stories. Even though, looking back, little things started right away. Tiny stuff. A door that shouldn't have swung open. Footsteps when nobody was upstairs. That weird feeling of being watched that you brush off because you don't want to be the person who jumps at shadows. And we always did what skeptics do. We explained it away. Settling house. Draft. Old pipes. Overactive imagination. End of story. Then we brought our baby home. Her name was Mila, and I swear, that girl was a miracle on 2 tiny feet. She came into the world way too early and fought like she had something to prove. We spent months in and out of the hospital, living on coffee and prayers, watching monitors like our lives depended on it. And when we finally got her home, it felt like the universe had handed us something fragile and sacred. That's why when something strange happened, I refused to let my mind go anywhere scary with it. Because one afternoon, broad daylight, my partner at the time, Evan, noticed these little bright orbs hovering above Mila's crib. And I mean, he took pictures. Clear as day. He's showing me his phone like, "Bree, tell me you see this." And I did see it, but I laughed it off. I told him it had to be dust in a sunbeam, or light catching the lens weird. Anything other than what my gut quietly whispered. Because the truth is, I didn't want anything dark anywhere near my baby. So I chose the explanation that let me breathe. Life settled into that exhausting, beautiful rhythm of being new parents. And once we felt like we could finally function again, we started remodeling. Just simple stuff. Paint, flooring, fixing up old rooms. And that's when the whole house shifted. It wasn't like a movie where lights flicker and a voice whispers your name. It was subtler than that, and worse, because it felt like it was inside the air. The atmosphere got heavy. Not sad heavy, angry heavy. Like you'd walked into a room right after a screaming argument and the walls still remembered it. And that week, everything that could go wrong did. Tools breaking, pipes acting up, the power glitching, tempers short for no reason. And my husband, Caleb, he started sleeping badly, waking up over and over, restless, like his body wouldn't let him sink into sleep. Until one night, it happened. I still get cold thinking about it. He woke up in absolute panic, like he'd been ripped out of a nightmare, but he couldn't move. Not at first. He was making these awful sounds, like gagging and gasping at the same time. And when his arms finally jerked free, he started hitting at me, yelling, "Why are you on my back? Get off me! I can't move!" And I'm trying to process what he's even saying, because I'd been dead asleep, fully asleep. My mind was foggy, my heart was pounding, and I'm just staring at him, confused. And then I saw her, a girl, or maybe a small woman. Teenaged, maybe. Hard to pin down because she wasn't exactly solid. She had this hazy, fog-like outline around her, like she didn't belong to the same sharp world we did. The best way I can describe it is, she looked like she was in grayscale, like an old black and white film dropped into our full-color bedroom. She was sitting there like she had every right to be, just watching. And beside his foot, this detail sticks in my brain because it felt so strangely specific. There was this uncovered outlet, a 4-plug thing, open, exposed. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later someone told me entities can draw from electricity. I don't know if that's true. I'm not claiming it is. I'm just telling you what I noticed and what people said afterward. The moment I tore my eyes away from her to help Caleb, to actually listen to what he was screaming, I looked back, and she was gone. Just gone. No fading, no movement, no sound, like she'd never existed. But Caleb was still fighting for air, still shaking, and once he finally sat up and the panic slowed enough for him to talk, he looked at me with this stunned, almost embarrassed confusion. He said, "I don't understand what just happened. It felt like someone was sitting on my back, pinning me down, and then..." He swallowed, eyes wide. Like a hand was jammed in my mouth, like it was trying to go down my throat. People don't throw up in their sleep. What was that? He genuinely thought it had been me messing with him, until the reality landed. I had been asleep. I couldn't have been on his back, and whatever he felt, it was real enough to make him gag and vomit. That's when I told him what I saw, and saying it out loud made the room feel even colder, like the walls leaned in to listen. I described her exactly how I saw her, foggy, silent, wrong, like she was half dream and half real. After that, I couldn't sleep in our bedroom anymore. I moved to the living room with a blanket like I was a kid hiding from a storm. And the house didn't let us forget. We heard footsteps on the stairs, doors opening and closing when nobody was near them. That classic cliché paranormal stuff you always hear people talk about, and you're like, sure, okay. Except it was our house, our life, our baby in the next room. And here's the thing, until that night, it never felt violent. Weird, yes. Unsettling, yes. But not dangerous. After that night, it was like some line got crossed. The air grew heavier, thicker. Walking in from outside felt like stepping into a pressure change. And if we stayed inside too long, it did something to us. Like it soaked into our moods. We'd get depressed, angry, exhausted. Not regular tired, drained. Like something was taking everything good out of you and replacing it with its own bleak weight. Then the electrical stuff started. Little fires that made no sense. A scorch mark here, a melted plug there. Like the house was malfunctioning around us. And eventually, we left. We moved, and it felt like escaping something you can't properly name. Like breathing clean air for the first time in months. Only afterward did we learn what had happened in that one room my parents never used. A boy, young, troubled, had lived there before. He'd painted dark symbols on the walls, got obsessed with some really grim beliefs, and he took his own life. In that exact room. But because he was still alive when he was transported and later died at the hospital, the home hadn't been legally classified the way it would have been if he'd been pronounced dead inside it. So nobody disclosed it. My parents never knew. We never knew. And I'll tell you something. I've replayed it 1,000 times in my head. All the little things. The way that one room felt avoided. And that night with Caleb. I don't know what she was. I don't know what any of it was exactly. But I know what I saw, and I know what he felt, and I know that house wasn't empty. So, I'm the kind of person who really tries to rule things out before I start whispering the word paranormal. Like it's a diagnosis. I'm not out here looking for ghosts. Honestly, I don't know enough about electrical stuff to confidently explain what's been happening in my house, and it's starting to feel a little too consistent to shrug off. It started small. We have these fake tea lights, battery ones, with a tiny switch on the bottom. Super simple. They sit in these chunky little ceramic holders, kind of like ornate sugar skull style. So once they're in there, they don't get bumped unless one of us actually picks them up. At first, I'd switch them off, and later I'd notice they were back on again. And I'll admit, my first thought was, oh, okay, that was probably Miles, my partner. He's the type to absent-mindedly do something and genuinely not remember. So I figured it was just one of those moments. No big deal. But then I saw it. Not in a dramatic movie way, just I'm sitting there, the TV off, the room calm, me on the couch messing around on my phone, and one of the tea lights just clicks itself on, like it decided it was time. So I start troubleshooting, right? Like, okay, vibrations. We have a big dog, Juno, and she can shake the entire universe just by flopping down on the floor. And we used to have this touch-activated pumpkin decoration on the TV stand that would turn on if she walked past it, because the slightest nudge would set it off. Except, the tea lights weren't like that. They weren't touch-sensitive. They had switches. And the weirder part is, sometimes it happens when Juno isn't even in the room, or she's fully asleep, not moving, not even dreaming. And when I pick the tea light up to check, the switch is fully flipped to on. That's what gets me, because it's not like the light is glitching. It's like the switch itself is changing position, which makes absolutely no sense. Then I bought this tiny tabletop Christmas tree, battery-powered, and it turns on with a press button. You press it once, it lights up, and you can cycle through different modes: twinkle, fade, flash, whatever. And after you go through all the settings, it turns off again at the end of the loop. That tree is on the other side of the room, not near the tea lights, not near the TV stand, not near anything that could easily explain it. And that has started turning itself on too. Not only turning on, sometimes it pops on already set to the exact mode I like, which isn't the first setting. You'd have to click through a couple to get there. So it's not just doing some default wake up thing. It's like it's picking the one I used last on its own. And on top of that, we have a TV that has been turning itself on in the middle of the night for years. Since I first bought it, back when I lived in a totally different house. I've woken up to go to the bathroom and walked into the living room to find the TV on like it's been patiently waiting for me. No timer, no consistent time. Sometimes it's 1 a.m., sometimes 3:30, sometimes closer to dawn. Just on. For the longest time, I told myself it was probably someone nearby with a universal remote. Like maybe a neighbor accidentally turning it on. Except it's happened in 2 different houses now, and I'm starting to run out of ways to dismiss it without stretching. So I'm sitting here trying to be reasonable, asking myself, is this all connected? Is it just coincidence? Is it multiple boring explanations that just feel spooky because they're piling up? Stuff goes missing, like genuinely missing. And then it shows up later, in places that make no sense. In rooms we barely use, in spots neither of us would put it. And sure, I get it. People are forgetful. In life is messy. But it's happening often enough now that it's starting to feel pointed. And Juno, my bigger dog, sometimes growls at the back room like there's something in there she doesn't trust. She'll stand between me and that doorway like she's on duty, especially if I'm in the kitchen at night, because the kitchen's connected to that area. It's not playful growling either. It's that low, serious warning sound that makes you instinctively go quiet. And then there are the noises. Little weird ones. Whispery ones. The kind that make you pause and go, "Did you hear that?" Only to realize you're the only one awake. Sometimes I've thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Movement. A shape. A presence. But it's always at night, and usually when I'm half asleep, so I don't want to trust my brain. Sleepy brains are dramatic. They'll turn a shadow into a whole person if you let them. So that's where I'm at. I'm not trying to convince myself it's haunted. I'm actively trying not to. I just want someone who knows more than I do about electronics, about interference, about anything practical, to tell me what I might be missing. Because I'd really rather hear, "Oh, that's a common battery contact issue," than start side-eyeing my own living room like it's hiding secrets. But at the same time, it's getting harder to laugh off. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Paranormal M channel. Christmas is almost here, and the year's coming to a close. What's something you're proud of accomplishing this year? Drop it in the comments. Another year has gone by doing what I love, being here and sharing my mysterious experiences with all of you. Thank you so much for all the love, for listening, and for supporting the Paranormal M channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the newest videos. And, as always, send us your own mysterious experiences. Now, grab your headphones, switch on your nightlight, and let's dive into today's stories. Okay, so this happened a couple weeks back, and I still get that little shiver in my shoulders when I think about it. My partner Eli and I were at home doing that familiar, we're bored but too comfortable to do anything routine. Then I looked outside, and it was that perfect kind of cold. Crisp, clean, the kind of weather that makes you feel awake. Cold is our favorite, so I said, "Let's go find a trail. Just walk, be in nature, be together." Eli pulled up a park not too far away, and we drove over. The area around it was all these newer neighborhoods, big, polished houses, the kind where the lawns look combed. So we figured there had to be construction nearby, because that's been popping up everywhere lately. We get to the trailhead, and there's a sign with different loop options. We picked the short one, something like a 20 to 25 minute loop, because, honestly, we weren't trying to get caught out too late. Fall and winter always trick you. It feels like you have time, and then suddenly the sky's like, "Nope, it's night now." Right away we walked through this tunnel, one of those long, shadowy ones that makes you feel like you're stepping into a different scene. You know the vibe. Like in a thriller where you're suddenly listening to your own footsteps a little too closely. We both got a little quieter, a little more alert, but kept going. The trail was mostly wooded on both sides. Not scary woods exactly, just dense. We passed a sweet older couple heading the other way, smiling, totally relaxed. And that actually made me feel better, like, okay, normal place, normal day. But then, after about 10 minutes or so, things started to change. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was more like a slow realization. The birds stopped. Not less birds. Not they flew off. Just nothing. No chirping, no rustling, no little sounds in the brush. It felt like someone turned the volume down on the whole world. We kept walking and came up on part of the trail where you could see some construction area set back a bit, equipment and disturbed earth, but it was clearly after hours. No workers, no trucks running, no noise. Still, no wind either. No traffic sounds. Just this weird, heavy silence. And I swear to you, it got so quiet that it felt loud. Like if I had dropped my keys, it would have sounded like a crash. We stopped. I remember looking at Eli like, "Do you feel that?" before I even said anything. And then we saw it. A black plastic shopping bag, like the kind you get from a store, was just hanging in midair. Not stuck on a branch, not snagged on anything, not whipping around, just floating. And it wasn't close to us either. It was a decent distance up the trail, out in the open where we could clearly see it. And here's the part that makes my skin prickle. It didn't move. It just stayed there like it had been placed in the air on purpose. We stood frozen, staring at it, trying to make it make sense. Because there was no wind. None. Not even that faint drift you feel on your face. The trees weren't swaying. Nothing. I remember thinking, how is that possible? And then, the second we shifted, like the second we started to move again, the bag started to drop, but so slowly. Not like a bag falling, more like it was sinking, like it was being lowered. And right then, right in that same moment, both of us got that feeling. You know the one, that deep, instinctive feeling that you're not alone, even when you can't see anyone. It felt like something in the woods had noticed us noticing, and we did. We didn't run, but we walked fast enough that it was basically a power march. My heart was pounding, and I kept glancing into the trees like I expected to see, I don't even know what, just something. We looked back once, and the bag was still there, still in the air, only lower now, like it was continuing that slow, unreal descent. We got out of that park so fast. By the time we reached the car, the sky had fully shifted into dusk dark, like the day had slipped away while we weren't paying attention. And the whole drive home, we kept saying the same things over and over. There was no wind. There was nobody there. It didn't make sense. Eli has always teased me for being paranoid whenever I get a weird feeling about something. But that night, he was the one going, yeah, okay, that was real. That was something. And honestly, I don't know what it was. I don't have a neat explanation. All I know is it was one of the most eerie things I've ever experienced, and I've had a couple strange moments in my life. But that one felt like a warning. And I'll tell you this for free, we did not stay long enough to find out what it wanted. So, I want to tell you about someone I met over and over again in the strangest way, starting when I was about 11. I still can't fully explain it, but I remember it so clearly that it feels stitched into my life. The first time was in a dream. In the dream, I was back at my elementary school. Same hallways, same smell of old cleaning products and chalk dust, like my brain recreated every detail on purpose. And there he was, a man in one of the classrooms. He looked like he'd stepped out of an old photograph. Rumpled suit, heavy shoes, and this worn hat that felt decades out of place. If I had to guess, I'd say he looked like he belonged to the 1940s, not my little school. And the weirdest part? It wasn't just, oh, there's a man. It was like the dream had rules. I remember hearing, not with my ears, more like inside my head, this calm but urgent voice telling me, you have to get to him. So I rushed into the classroom, heart pounding, expecting to find him up close. But it wasn't him. It was only a reflection. Like he was there, but not really there. The reflection was coming from the window, and in the dream my logic was like, okay, then the window is the way through. So I climbed up, pushed myself toward the glass, and somehow ended up outside, on the other side, chasing him through streets that didn't quite look like my town, but also did. You know how dreams do that. I kept running, turning corners, calling out without sound, and every time I thought I was about to catch him, he'd just drift farther away. Always just out of reach. Then, not long after that dream, maybe days later, maybe a week, it's fuzzy. We had one of those late school nights where parents meet with the head teacher. My mom, Marina, couldn't leave me home alone, so she brought me with her. The school felt completely different at night. Quieter, emptier, like the building was holding its breath. While she was in the meeting, I sat by the stairs with my legs pulled in close, trying to keep busy, trying not to feel how huge the shadows looked. And then I saw him again. Same classroom, same place as the dream. But this time, he didn't look like a normal person. He was pale. Not light-skinned pale. More like washed out, almost glowing. Like someone had drained the color out of him. The old hat was still there, the same kind of clothes. It was definitely him, even though he looked more like the kind of ghost people post online with bad filters. I froze. I didn't scream, didn't run. I just sat there on the stairs, staring, because my body didn't know what else to do. He moved, too. Small movements. Turning his head, shifting his weight. Pacing slowly inside the classroom like he was waiting for something. But he didn't speak. He didn't gesture. He didn't come toward me. He just looked at me, quietly, steadily, until the meeting ended and my mom came out. I told her on the way home. I remember clutching her hand and talking too fast, trying to get it all out before my courage disappeared. But she brushed it off, smiled that kids have vivid imaginations smile, and told me I was probably tired. I tried to accept that explanation. I really did. But then came the one that still gives me chills. A couple of weeks later, I woke up in my bedroom one morning, half asleep. That heavy, floaty feeling where you're not fully in your body yet. My eyes were still closed, and I suddenly had this sharp sense that I wasn't alone. You know that feeling, right? Like the air changes, like the room has an extra presence inside it. I kept my eyes shut because I was scared. I remember thinking, if I don't look, it can't be real. A completely ordinary human sound, which somehow made it worse. I opened my eyes slowly, barely a slit at first, and there he was, right in front of my bed, close enough that it felt impossible. He looked exactly like the figure at school, all that drained-out whiteness, the old hat, the same era of clothing, like he'd walked out of a different decade and into my room without making a single sound. He just stood there and looked at me. And then, he smiled. Not a scary grin, not threatening, more like recognition. Like he was relieved I finally saw him clearly, like he'd been trying to show up in a way I'd understand. I was absolutely freaking out, don't get me wrong. I couldn't move. But the fear wasn't, he's going to hurt me. It was the shock of seeing something that shouldn't exist, standing in a place that's supposed to be safe. Then I heard my parents from the other room call my name. "Are you okay?" Because apparently they thought I had sneezed. I turned my head toward their voice, said I was fine, forced myself to sound normal. And when I turned back, he was gone. Just gone. Like the air had swallowed him. After that, I didn't see him again the same way. Not in the bright, undeniable, there's a person in the room kind of way. Years passed. I grew up. I tried to file it away under childhood weirdness, but I never forgot him. And honestly, I've always had this pull toward the unconventional. Things people roll their eyes at. Things that don't fit neatly in a box. So when I was around 30, I signed up for a free guided meditation class. Nothing intense, just curiosity. The instructor had this gentle voice, and she asked us to close our eyes, relax, and imagine walking down a staircase. She said that at the bottom, there would be helpers, guides, protectors, whatever you want to call them, waiting for us. And the second she said that, I saw him. Immediately. But this time he wasn't exactly the same. He looked older, heavier somehow, like a different version of himself. The hat wasn't as crisp in my mind, the shape of his face was different, but the feeling was unmistakable. It was him. The same presence, the same signature, like seeing someone's silhouette and knowing who it is before you even make out the details. In the meditation, we were led into this garden space, warm, still, almost glowing. We were told to ask for healing for something we carried, and in my mind, Everyone sat in a loose circle, these figures the teacher described, and him among them, calm and quiet, like he'd always been. He didn't do anything dramatic, no grand messages, no booming voice. He was just there, part of the circle, like he belonged. Then the instructor guided us back up the stairs, and the meditation ended. And after that, nothing. I haven't seen him again. But I'll be honest with you, even now, I still think about that man in the old hat. Not like a horror story, more like an unanswered letter, like something brushed against my life again and again and left me with this soft, haunting question. Who was he? And why did he find me? So, I need to tell you something that still makes my stomach twist a little when I think about it. It happened last Monday night, early December. My dad, let's call him Ray because he'll hate me if he knows I'm repeating this, was over at my Aunt Denise's house helping set up for a family birthday. Balloons, streamers, the whole let's make it look cheerful routine. And before I go any further, I've got to be honest about Denise. She's not a kind person. She's the type who says cruel things like it's nothing, and she keeps people around her that make your instincts scream. The rough crowd. The kind of guys who talk too quietly, stare too long, and you feel it in your bones that you shouldn't be in the same room with them. Her fiancé used to own the place. He passed away last year after being sick for a while, and his ashes are still in the house. And ever since then, Denise has stayed close with some of his old friends. She calls them her protection, like that's supposed to make it feel safer. One of those friends, this man named Daryl, had been really, really ill with cancer. No wife, no kids, nowhere else to go. So he'd been renting a room there off and on. Anyway, that Monday night, my dad was there mostly by himself. Denise was shut away in her bedroom doing whatever she does, and Daryl wasn't even there. He was supposedly over at his sister's place. My dad was just decorating. Normal. Boring. And he's not the kind of person who gets rattled easily. He doesn't drink. He doesn't mess with anything. He's steady. Practical. Even if he's open-minded about weird stuff, he's not dramatic. So when he came to me afterward, quiet, serious, I knew something had gotten under his skin. He told me he went into the kitchen to make coffee. He's standing at the counter, messing with the coffee maker, back turned to the room, and out of nowhere he gets hit with this smell. Not like garbage, not like something spoiled. He said it was the kind of stench that makes your brain go, something is wrong, before you even have words for it. Like rot, like a body, like death. And he said the hair on the back of his neck lifted instantly, like his body knew before his mind did. He turns his head, and under the kitchen table he sees something moving out. And here's where his voice changed when he told me, like he didn't even want to say it out loud. He said it looked dog-like, but not like any dog he's ever seen. It was on all fours, but the way its legs bent, especially the back legs, was wrong. Too human, like the joints didn't match what they were pretending to be. And the strangest part was how it looked. Not fully real. He described it like trying to look at something through thick, warped glass. Like the shape was there, but the image didn't sit correctly in the room. Like it was slightly out of place with the kitchen, as if the background behind it didn't line up with the walls and cabinets the way it should. He said it had rough, patchy fur, like it was mangy or sick. Bald spots where you could see pale skin. But the feet, if you could even call them paws, were darker, almost black, like they'd been dipped in soot. And the thing wasn't rushing. It wasn't startled. It was stalking, calm as anything, sliding out from under the table and moving toward the living room like it owned the place. Nothing. Gone. He started checking rooms, looking behind furniture, opening doors. And he said something else that stuck with me. While he was searching, his fear shifted. Like the nausea and dread melted into this weird anger, hot and sudden, like something was pushing his emotions, or like the house itself was pressing on him. He didn't find anything. No animal. No explanation. Just that smell, and that image burned into his head. Then the next day, Tuesday, Daryl died. And yes, he was terminal, so it wasn't like lightning out of a clear sky. But the timing. It's hard to ignore the timing. My dad didn't tell me this like a ghost story. He told me like someone confessing something they wished they could unsee. Like it embarrassed him to even say it, but it scared him more to keep it to himself. And now I'm stuck with it, you know? Because if it was just a weird shadow or a trick of the light, fine. But he smelled that smell. He felt it. And he's not the kind of man who invents things for attention. So I keep asking myself the same question. What did he see? So I've been staying at my grandparents' place for the week because I'm dog sitting. They live way out in the sticks in upstate New York, like really rural. And they've got 3 big Dobermans, Coda, Maisie, and Rook. I adore them, and honestly, I'd rather crash here than have them stuck in kennels whenever my grandparents take off for a day or two. Anyway, my grandpa, Harold, used to be a volunteer firefighter. For as long as I can remember, he's kept this old police scanner running. Even though he hasn't been on a fire call in years, that scanner still sits there, crackling and hissing like a little mechanical campfire in the corner of the kitchen. I've grown up with that sound. It's background noise to me. It's the kind of thing you stop hearing unless it suddenly goes quiet. Last night, I was making dinner. Nothing fancy, just trying to keep the dogs from orbiting my knees while I cooked. And I was standing right next to the scanner when something cut through all that familiar static. Whispering. Not the usual clipped radio dispatch voices, not garbled chatter, actual whispering. Low, intimate, like someone was leaning in close to a mic and trying not to be heard. And I just froze with a spoon in my hand like, what? Because listen, I've heard that scanner blab and squawk my whole life. Decades of it. I have never, not once, heard it whisper. But weirdly, that's not even the part that hit me the hardest. A few years ago, my grandparents moved. Their old place was this ancient farmhouse, 2 centuries old easy. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that house had a vibe. Not just creaky floors old. It felt occupied. Like you were never fully alone even when you absolutely were. There was one thing in particular that used to happen when I stayed there by myself. I'd be sitting in the living room or upstairs, and I'd hear what sounded like a couple arguing. Not words I could clearly make out, more like the rhythm of it. A man's voice, a woman's voice, frustration rising and falling. Like a fight happening in the next room, except there was no next room where anyone could be. When they moved into this newer house out in the woods, all of that stopped. No footsteps, no weird doors. No, someone just walked across the hall feeling. Nothing. This place felt normal, until last night. Because the whispering on the scanner started, and within minutes I heard it. That same familiar arguing sound. The exact same cadence. Like the old farmhouse had found my address and forwarded itself here. At first it was faint, like it was far away. Then it got louder, sharper, and it seemed like it was coming from outside, right out by the driveway. There's a window over the kitchen sink that looks straight out across the whole driveway. So I set the spoon down and leaned in, staring out like I expected to see headlights or someone standing there with their hands in the air. Nothing. Just the bird feeder swaying a little and a handful of birds hopping around underneath it, perfectly casual, like the world was completely normal. But the arguing kept climbing. It went from tense to nasty, and then it tipped into screaming, full-on screaming, like someone had just snapped. And the second it hit that pitch, every single bird bolted at once. Like they all got the same invisible signal. Wings everywhere, feeder swinging hard, and suddenly the whole yard felt emptied out. That's when I felt my stomach drop, because birds don't do that for no reason. And out there, in the woods, you learn to respect animals when they decide something's wrong. I stood there for a second, listening, trying to figure out if the sound would make more sense from outside, if maybe it was a neighbor or somebody on the road, or even a TV carrying weirdly through the trees. But it didn't sound like it was coming from the road. It sounded like it was coming from the woods in front of the house. Like the trees were holding the voices and pushing them forward. And I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. But standing there with the cold air on my face and that noise threading through the darkness, it didn't feel like a, weird moment. It felt like a, don't be stupid moment. So I went back inside, shut the door, and locked it. Then I locked it again like that would somehow help. I pulled the curtains, all of them, every window, even the ones that don't really show anything but trees. I just needed the house to feel sealed off. The scanner kept crackling. The whispering came and went like it was deciding whether it wanted my attention. I didn't know what you're supposed to do with something like that. Call someone and say, "Hi, can you come over? I think the woods are arguing." So I did the only thing I could think to do. I herded all 3 dogs into the bedroom with me, wedged myself as far from the driveway side of the house as possible, and let them pile up like warm, tense little guardians. I'm not usually the kind of person who panics over every bump and creak. Old houses make sounds. Pipes knock. Wind moves branches. I can talk myself down from a lot. But being alone in the middle of nowhere is different. Out here, you don't get to pretend you're the biggest thing around. You don't get to get careless just because things have been quiet for a while. Whether it's a real person, an animal, or something you can't neatly explain, getting too comfortable out here can come with consequences. So I stayed awake way longer than I wanted to, listening to the silence between the crackles, and feeling those dogs breathe beside me. And I kept thinking the same thing over and over. This house has been peaceful for years. So why did the old farmhouse's voices show up now? Hey, can I tell you something that still makes my chest tighten a little when I think about it? So, early this year, right at the beginning of January, I got a call that my sibling, Mira, had been in an accident. She survived, thank God, but the doctors said she needed about a month of strict bed rest. And I remember sitting there doing the math in my head and realizing I didn't have a job. I didn't have savings. I barely had anything. All I could see was medical costs and groceries and transportation and all the little things that pile up when life gets scary. One evening, I hit this point where stress stopped feeling like thoughts and started feeling like a weight on my body. I crawled under my blanket and, honestly, I didn't even pray. I didn't journal. I didn't do anything spiritual. I just tried to disappear into sleep, like shutting down was the only way to survive that moment. And while I was lying there, phone pressed somewhere under the blanket with me, I got 3 calls back to back. From 3 different companies. Like, one after the other, almost unreal. One of them offered me a job, decent pay, the kind of pay that makes you exhale for the first time in weeks. I took it. And for a little while I thought, okay, maybe this is the turning point. But then, it wasn't. A couple months in, they said they'd hired too many people and they let me go. Just like that. And I remember feeling embarrassed for believing it was going to last. Like I'd celebrated too soon. A few months later, money got tight again. There was this one day, mid-June, I think it was the 16th, where I spiraled. I spent most of the day crying. Not the quiet kind either, the kind where you get a headache and your face hurts and you still can't stop. That night I stood in front of my altar and I didn't speak gently. I was angry. I was basically yelling into the air like, "Are you serious? Do you see me? Do you see how hard I'm trying?" And the next morning, I woke up to a notification that $10,000 had been transferred into my account. It was a delayed payment from a previous employer that had been stuck for a while and finally got released. The timing was so sharp it almost scared me, like I'd been heard immediately. Then there were these smaller moments that felt like quiet little jokes from the universe. Like, in May, my laptop broke, completely. And I was devastated because it wasn't just an expense, it was also my lifeline for work. I remember sitting there with my journal, trying to calm down, flipping open this notebook I hadn't touched in ages, and there was cash tucked inside. Not a fortune, but enough to soften the panic. It was money I must have hidden there long ago and totally forgotten. And then, this other thing happened. I had a job I joined in late summer, and on paper it was fine. The boss, Rohan, actually respected my work. He praised me, gave me responsibilities, made me feel seen. But I kept getting this weird feeling, like something wasn't clean about the business side of things. Not dramatic, just off. Like my gut was whispering, "Don't build your life here." So I made an excuse. I said I needed to go back to my hometown, and I resigned. And then, 3 days later, my aunt passed away. I actually did have to go home. And that's what messes with me. The way my resignation looked impulsive at first, and then it felt like protection. And on top of all that, the past 6 months have had these almost silly blessings. Random deliveries, chocolates, brownies, ice cream, showing up for me for free, in strange little ways. Like someone placed an order by mistake, or a coupon glitch, or a friend of a friend sending something and refusing payment. It happened enough times that it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like a pattern. Like, okay, what is this? So yeah, that's where I am. Because on one hand, I'm spiritual. I want to believe there's something, someone, watching over me. A guardian angel, an ancestor, the universe, whatever name fits. The timing of certain things feels too precise to ignore. But on the other hand, I've struggled so much financially. In the last 8 or 9 months, I've lost 4 jobs, one after another. And the confusing part is, I didn't leave because of fights. In most of them, the employers liked me. They told me I was hardworking. They appreciated me. And still, something kept ending, or shifting, or collapsing. And sometimes I think, if there really is a higher power looking out for me, why not help me keep one of those jobs? Why all this instability when I already carry a heavy past, depression, fear that hits me out of nowhere? Why the constant resetting? I'm not saying this like I'm accusing the universe. I'm just trying to understand. Maybe there's something I'm supposed to learn. Maybe this is shaping me in a way I can't see yet. Maybe one day it'll make sense, and I'll look back and feel grateful, even for the hard parts, like I oddly have before. But right now, Right now, I'm living in this strange space where life keeps knocking me down, and then handing me a small mercy at the exact moment I'm about to disappear. And I don't know what to call that. I just know it's real. Hey, so I don't really know the right way to say this without sounding dramatic, but I'm just going to be honest with you. I've always had this feeling that the place I grew up in, it's got something heavy hanging around it. Like the land itself is carrying a mood, and sometimes it slips inside the house with us. Not every day, not even every week, but often enough that you start watching corners without realizing you're doing it. My grandpa, well, my pap, Eddie, used to talk about seeing people who weren't there. He'd say it like it was no bigger a deal than seeing deer in the yard. He'd tell us he'd catch glimpses of indigenous figures out by the tree line, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes late at night like they didn't care what time it was. Just present, passing through, watching. He wasn't a guy who chased attention either, so when he said it, you could tell he meant it. And my mom, Renee, she's had her own experiences, but hers always sounded scarier. She'd talk about shadow shapes in the hallway, in the kitchen, at the top of the stairs. Not, maybe it was the light type stuff. More like a presence that made her stomach drop. There were times she got so freaked out she'd go sit outside on the steps just to breathe and calm herself down. Like she'd just walked out of a fight she didn't want to be in. Behind our house, there's this patch of woods. Nothing special to look at, honestly. Just trees, leaves, old brush. That quiet that feels thicker the deeper you go. But there are these small raised mounds back there. They're not huge, and you might not notice them if you weren't looking. But once you know they're there, you can't unsee them. Pap Eddie always said those mounds were burial grounds, or at least connected to something that should be left alone. And as a kid, you know how kids are. Part of you is scared, but a bigger part of you is like, prove it. Like the world is a mystery box and you're allowed to pry it open. I used to escape into those woods a lot. It felt like my own little hiding place. Like if I couldn't control anything else, at least I could control where I walked and what I found. One afternoon, I'm guessing I was 8, 9, somewhere around there, I went back there with a stick. It was late autumn, the kind of day where everything smells like damp leaves and the sun is already giving up early. And I stood over one of those mounds and thought, just a little, just to see. So I started digging. Not deep, barely anything. A few inches, tops. Just scraping and pushing loose dirt aside like I was looking for treasure. And then, everything changed so fast it still makes my skin tighten when I think about it. The air dropped cold. Not like, it's fall cold. Like the temperature got pulled down around me in one clean motion. My cheeks went numb. My hands felt stiff. It was so sudden it made my eyes water. Then the birds, crows I think, or maybe blackbirds, just showed up. Like the trees had been empty and someone flipped a switch. They filled the branches above me, and the sound got loud in that ugly way, like yelling layered on yelling. It felt aimed, like it wasn't random nature noise anymore. It was reaction. The wind kicked up too, whipping through the leaves, pushing against my shoulders. And I remember this weird, irrational thought. They know what I'm doing. So I stopped digging, froze, and just listened. And I swear, listen, I know how this sounds. I swear I heard something under the dirt. Not a voice, not words, more like a dry, delicate rattling. Like bone on bone, faint but unmistakable, right beneath where I'd scraped. My stomach dropped so hard I felt like I was going to throw up. In that moment, whatever it was, stuck to me. After that, life started sliding sideways. Not like lightning strikes every day, more like a long, steady drip of things going wrong, one after another, in ways that made you look up and go, "Seriously? Again?" My parents split up a couple years later. I'm not going to get into that because it's private and, honestly, we've all worked hard to heal. But the timing always felt like part of the same thread. Then the house started falling apart. Small things first: stuff breaking, leaks, repairs that never seemed to fully solve anything. My mom had to have surgery, thyroid issues, and even though she's okay in the "she's still here" way, it opened the door to a bunch of ongoing health complications. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but the kind of thing that drains you slowly and changes your entire routine. And me? I've battled my own stuff for a long time. Anxiety that feels like living with a siren in the background. Depression that turns the simplest tasks into a mountain. My room got messy in that way that isn't laziness, it's just a visible symptom. I bounced between jobs. I'd feel hopeful for a minute, then it would slip out of my hands again. I'm working on it now. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I just want you to understand the shape of it. Here's the part that messes with my head. I kept leaving. Like, not in the normal "I'm growing up" way. I mean leaving young, decisively, like my body knew before my brain did. When I was around 12, I moved away for a while to live with my dad, out of state. Later, as a teenager, I left again to stay with my girlfriend at the time and her family. At the time, I told myself it was love, or missing my dad, or needing a change. But looking back now, older, calmer, I can't help thinking, why did I feel such a strong pull to get out? I wasn't being abused. My mom loved me. The house wasn't bad in the normal ways. And yet, I kept choosing distance like it was survival. And then recently, this happened. We had our roof redone. Brand new, solid. We were relieved, like, finally, something fixed. And within a couple weeks, a dead tree came down in a storm and landed right over the spot where I sleep, right above where my head would have been. If the roof hadn't been redone, I don't even like finishing that thought. What's creepy is, we've had stronger winds before, big ones, the kind that make the house groan. That tree never fell then. But right after we fixed the roof, that's when it drops? It felt personal in this cold, silent way, like the house was saying, "Oh, you thought you were getting ahead?" And there are other stories too. I could seriously go on forever. Our old dog, Buddy, after he passed, there were things that happened that still make my throat tighten. And our other dog, Daisy, same kind of thing. Like the house couldn't just let grief be grief. It had to add a strange little punctuation mark to it. That's what I keep circling back to. The amount of it. The stacking. The way it doesn't feel like one bad year. It feels like a pattern with a personality. At the same time, I'm not some hardcore paranormal person. I'm not out here yelling "curse" every time a cupboard creaks. Part of me knows coincidence is real, and life is messy, and families go through things. But another part of me, the part that remembers the sudden cold and those birds and that dry rattling under the dirt, that part wonders if I stirred something up as a kid, or if something was already there and I just tapped on the wrong door. I've always been the kind of person who picks up on people's moods too. I can walk into a room and feel when someone's hurting, even if they're smiling. I don't know if that means I'm empathic, or if I'm just observant and anxious and wired to notice shifts. But it makes this whole thing harder, because sometimes I can't tell what's intuition and what's my own fear echoing back at me. So yeah, that's the story. I don't have a neat ending. I don't have proof. I just have a house that feels like it's holding its breath, a childhood moment that still feels too sharp to be nothing, and this long trail of misfortune that keeps nudging me like, look closer. And some nights, lying there, I catch myself thinking, what if the land remembers? What if the house remembers? What if I didn't just dig into dirt? What if I dug into something that doesn't like being disturbed? Okay, so I'm not new to weird stuff around the house. I'm usually the kind of person who can talk myself down, you know? Like, there's a logical explanation. I'm just tired. I'm overthinking it. I've gotten pretty good at that over the years. But every now and then, something happens that makes it harder to laugh off. Like, that awful feeling of being watched. Not the casual, that was creepy kind. I mean the intense kind, where your skin goes prickly, your stomach drops, and you can almost feel your body gearing up to run even though you're standing perfectly still. Or little tech things that make no sense. Our smart speaker, ours is a Google one, not Alexa, will randomly crank itself up to a ridiculous volume. Like, it's usually set around 2 or 3, and suddenly it's blasting at 9 or 10 and announcing, "Sorry, I didn't catch that," when nobody has said a word. And sure, I know tech glitches happen, but it always seems to happen at the worst times, when the house is quiet. And then there was this one night a while back, maybe 3 months ago, around 2 a.m. I was in bed, half asleep, and someone knocked on my bedroom door. Not a soft knock, a loud, solid knock. The kind where you instantly sit up and your heart starts thumping. So I got up and opened the door right away, and there was no one there. At first, I told myself it had to be one of my parents messing with me or needing something. Except, both of them were asleep in their room, which is on the other side of the house. And the thing is, I'm weirdly tuned into the sounds of the house. I can hear everything. I can tell when someone opens their door, when the bathroom light flips on, even the creak patterns in the hallway floor. That night, nothing. No footsteps, no doors, no movement. Just the knock. I even checked. I walked a little further out, looked around, listened. Nothing. Still, I shoved it down and tried to convince myself it had to be my dad or my mom, even when I brought it up the next day and they both swore, seriously swore, it wasn't them. So I filed it away as one of those things and tried to move on. But then more recently, like maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, I was downstairs with my mom, Lena, watching TV. She paused the show to go upstairs and use the bathroom, and I stayed down to make us tea. Just normal, boring, cozy stuff. She'd only been upstairs for about a minute when I heard her call my name. Clear as day. Not muffled, not distant. Just my name, like she was standing at the top of the stairs. So I walked over toward the stairs, about to answer, and at the exact same time she starts coming down. And before I can even speak, she goes, "Did you just shout for me?" And I remember just staring at her like, "What?" I said, "No, I thought you shouted for me." We both kind of laughed, because what else do you do? That nervous little laugh people do when something unsettles them, but they don't want to admit it. And we brushed it off like, okay, creepy, and carried on. But then tonight, she comes into my room and she looks, not panicked, but serious. Like she just heard something she didn't want to repeat. And she tells me my dad, Marcus, who is so skeptical, like the type to roll his eyes at any paranormal conversation, said something happened last night. Apparently Lena had already gone to bed, and my dad stayed downstairs to finish a movie. He was alone, lights low, the usual. And he hears Lena whisper call his name. He was so sure of it that he actually got up and went into the kitchen, expecting to see her standing there or needing something. But the kitchen was empty. The only thing out of place was a cupboard door standing open, one of the higher ones, like it had been left that way or pulled open. So he checks the house, then goes upstairs to see if Lena's up. She's in bed, door closed, properly asleep, like deep asleep. Not fake asleep. Not, I just got back into bed. Just gone. And for my dad to admit it bothered him, that's what got me. Because he doesn't entertain this stuff. He doesn't want it to be weird. He's the, there's always an explanation person. And I'm sitting here now thinking, okay, this is starting to stack up. Because it's not just bumps in the night anymore. It's not just my imagination, or my anxiety, or a random tech glitch. It's voices. Familiar voices. Calling names. Perfectly normal, everyday sounds, except the person they belong to isn't there. And it's honestly starting to get under my skin. I don't even know what I believe. I'm not sitting here like, it's definitely a ghost. That doesn't feel right to me. But I also don't know what else to call it. I went down a rabbit hole the other night, because of course I did, and I read about this idea of mimics. Stuff that copies voices, tries to lure you, tries to get your attention by sounding like someone you trust. And I don't know how much of that is folklore and how much is people freaking themselves out online. But it made my stomach turn a little, because the pattern fits in a way I don't like. The thing is, we've lived in this house for 15 years. 15. And nothing like this has ever happened. Not like this. Little odd moments, sure, but nothing that made all of us stop and go, wait, did you hear that too? So now I'm stuck with this question I can't shake. Is it just stress and coincidence stacking up? Is it something explainable that we haven't clocked yet? Or is it something else? And if it is something else, whatever you want to call it, do we need to be cautious? Like, if you hear your name being called and you're alone, do you answer? Do you follow it? Because right now, I honestly don't know. And that not knowing is what's starting to bother me the most. So, let me tell you about the apartment that still messes with my head a little, even now. It started when I was 18. This was late 2018, right before everything in the world started feeling weird for other reasons. I'd just moved in with my mom for a while. She'd gone back to the town I grew up in, the same area where my dad still lived, even though they weren't together. I figured it would be a fresh start for both of us, you know? A couple months to regroup. And right next door to her unit was this neighbor, Marjorie, I'll call her. She was a lot. The kind of person who'd be yelling at thin air on the porch, having full conversations with nobody, swearing she saw things in the corners. Everyone in the complex kind of just gave her space. Anyway, when I moved in, that's when the knocking started. The room I stayed in shared a wall with the neighbor's kitchen. So at first I told myself, okay, pipes, cabinets, someone making a late-night snack. Totally normal. Except it wasn't normal. Because the knocking always started around midnight, like someone was clocking in for a shift. And it wouldn't be just one bump here and there. It was this weird pattern, on and off, scattered through the night. Some nights it was faint. Some nights it was like somebody was gently, but deliberately, tapping from the other side of the wall. I lived there maybe 2 months before life pushed me somewhere else. I moved in with my boyfriend at the time. Long story, not paranormal, just messy. But here's the thing. Even after I left, my mom told me the knocking kept happening. Same wall, same timing. And she also told me about things from before I ever moved in. Stuff she'd heard when she was alone in the house. Running footsteps at night. Heavy stomping like someone sprinting across the living room. The floors in that place were old and raised, so every step carried. My mom's the type who walks lightly, and I always did too. So the idea of someone thundering through the house when nobody else was there, yeah, that stuck with me. Then the pandemic hit in 2020, and not long after, Marjorie, the neighbor, passed away in her apartment. New people moved in after that. Different faces, different routines, but the knocking stayed. My mom actually asked the new neighbors once, kind of casually, like, "Hey, are you in your kitchen a lot late at night?" And they were like, "No, we thought you were the ones making noise." So at that point, it wasn't just my imagination. It was this shared, confused, "What is that?" between two households. Fast forward to early 2023. I stayed with my mom for a few nights before a trip. Back in that same bedroom, same wall. And that time, it was so loud I couldn't sleep at all. Not little bumps, not settling noises. It was like someone was knocking on a door right beside my head. Thump, 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 tight and deliberate, like they wanted attention. It was hot, so I left my door open and just laid there staring out into the little connector hallway area, more like a tiny square where the bedroom doors and bathroom door all meet. I'm lying there, dead still, watching that dark little space, and I hear my mom's bedroom door creak. Her door always creaks, always has. It doesn't matter what you do to it. So my brain goes, okay, she's going to the bathroom. But then, nothing. No lights, no footsteps. And in that apartment, footsteps are loud. The kind of loud where you can tell if someone's walking normally versus trying to be quiet. And there was just quiet. And then I saw a shadow slide through the doorway gap, like something passed between the doors. Not fast like a cat, not tall like an adult, just a shape, moving where a person would move. I felt my whole body go cold. But I didn't get up, because my little girl was asleep beside me at the time. She was about 3 then, and I didn't want to jolt her awake and scare her. So I just stayed frozen, staring, trying to convince myself it was my eyes adjusting to darkness. The next morning, I told my mom and her husband Eli, and Eli, without me prompting him, goes, "I heard the door creak too." He said both he and my mom were in bed when it happened. He didn't see the shadow, but he heard the same thing I heard. And then this year, more recently, my relationship fell apart and my daughter and I moved back in with my mom again. Same room, same wall. The knocking is still there. My daughter sleeps through it like it's a lullaby, honestly. I wish I could borrow that kind of peace. But once you've noticed something like that, you don't unnotice it. And then the other stuff started. Let me just run through it in order, because when I say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous. But living it didn't feel ridiculous. It felt invasive. First, the shower knocks. I was showering one night, leaning my shoulder against the shower wall, just letting the hot water hit my back. That wall faces the outside yard. Nothing back there. No walkway, no neighbors passing, nothing. And then, 3 loud knocks right where I was leaning. Not a pop, not a creak. Knocks, hard enough that I felt the vibration through the wall into my shoulder, like someone knocked from inside the drywall. Next, the blinds. My aunt, Renee, crashed on the couch one night. No fan, windows closed, totally still air. And she sits straight up and goes, "Did you hear that?" The metal blinds above the couch had rustled, like someone dragged fingers along them. Not a breeze flutter, more like a hand deliberately combed across them. Then, the curtain thing. My mom was on that same couch another night, and she suddenly jerks and grabs the back of her head like something touched her. She reaches behind her and finds the edge of the curtain had lifted up off the floor and fallen onto her head, like someone had tossed it. We tried to recreate it, pulling it, shifting it, turning on air, walking past it, and we could not get it to do that naturally. Then there was the lamp. I watch scary movies before bed sometimes. I never got to when I was younger, so now I'm catching up. Old classics, random newer stuff, all of it. One night I'm watching a horror movie with a ton of flickering lights. One of those scenes where the lights go nuts to build tension. And my bedroom lamp starts flickering right along with it. Not constantly. Just enough that I kept looking away from the TV like, is this syncing up. It felt like the room was responding. Then, the voice. This one wasn't mine, but it was about me. My mom and Eli told me that one morning, while I was asleep, they were getting ready for work and they heard my voice come from the living room. Even the dog turned its head toward the sound. And my voice, my exact tone, said sarcastically, "Okay." But I was asleep, in the bedroom, door shut. And then the thing that finally made my stomach drop. The night my daughter started talking about cracks in the wall, and she goes, very quietly, like she's narrating something, "The wall is cracking." And I remember thinking, that is not a phrase a 3-year-old casually says. Then she says it again, but this time with excitement, like she's watching something interesting. "The wall is cracking." And then she whispers, like it's a secret, "It's coming through." I'm staring at the wall so hard my eyes hurt. I can see nothing. No marks, no movement, no cracks. I ask her, "What's coming through, baby?" And she says, so casually, like she's naming an animal, "The monster." And then she starts giggling, like it's funny, like she's playing with it. I'm trying to stay calm because I don't want her to absorb fear from me. So I ask her what it looks like, and she describes it. A black face, a frown, tongue sticking out, like it's making a weird expression at her. She says it's scary, but she's not actually scared, more like she's entertained. She even made faces back at the wall, like it was a game. Eventually, she fell asleep again. I did not. I stayed awake listening to every tiny sound in that room. In the morning, I asked her about it, expecting the story to wobble the way kid stories do. But she looked right at the wall and said plainly, "The cracks are gone now." Same details, same description, same calm certainty. And then, last night, I woke up at 2 a.m. on the dot, the same time I noticed the weird cracking conversation happened before, and the bedroom door was open. I always sleep with that door shut. Always. It was open wide enough that it felt intentional. My first thought was my daughter had gotten up, wandered out, maybe went to my mom's room. But she was still asleep in her own bed. So I got up and shut the door. And the second I did, my window fan stopped. The light on it stayed on, but the blades just quit, like it got tired, like it got switched off without being switched off. I had to physically turn it off and back on to get it spinning again. And I stood there in the dark, holding my breath, just thinking, maybe none of these things mean anything. Maybe it's old wiring, old walls, an old building settling. But when it's the same room, the same wall, the same time of night, and your kid is staring at it like she sees something you can't, it stops feeling like random noise. It starts feeling like something's been trying, for a long time, to get noticed. Hey, so I don't remember this, obviously. I was only a few months old when it happened, but I've heard it so many times, from so many people. My mom, my grandma, my aunt, and even a family friend years later, that it feels like I've been carrying the memory anyway. And what gets me is how they all tell it almost the same. Different little details shift. How many people were there, what time exactly, who saw what first, but the spine of it never changes. In my family, it's just that night. The night they came to see the baby. So here's how it was told to me. I was about 3 months old. We were living in this modest little place. Nothing fancy, the kind of home where you hear everything. Pipes, footsteps, neighbors outside, the whole world close enough to feel through the walls. My grandma, let's call her Nana Salma, was staying with us for a while to help out, because my mom, Mira, was exhausted in that new baby way where you're tired in your bones. And my aunt, Lena, had come by that evening too. She was still young then, like late teens, and she always says she felt very grown up in that moment, until she didn't. It was late. Not midnight late, but late enough that the house had settled. The lights were low. The air had that quiet, heavy feeling it gets when everyone's supposed to be asleep, even if they aren't. Then, knock, knock, knock. Not the casual knock of a neighbor, not the polite tap of someone who might be lost. Nana Salma described it as insistent, like the person outside believed they belonged there. Lena went to the door first. She always tells it like she was annoyed more than scared at the beginning, because what kind of person knocks that late? She peeks through whatever small window or gap she can, and she sees a group of women standing there. Now, here's one of those details that changes depending on who's talking. My mom says it was 5 women. Lena insists it was 3, maybe 4 at most. And everyone shrugs when they argue about it, because this was decades ago, and fear does weird things to memory. But the one thing they all agree on is how they looked. They were covered. Headscarves pulled forward, shawls draped in a way that hid most of their hair and bodies. My mom says she couldn't really read their faces, like the light hit them wrong, or like they kept themselves angled away. She could clearly see one face, though, and she still describes it as strangely calm. Not friendly, just calm. Like a person asking for something they're sure they'll get. One of them spoke and said, very simply, "We came to meet the child." Lena, still running on irritation and protective instinct, goes, "It's late, come back tomorrow," and she shuts the door. Just like that. She turned around and told my mom, half eye-rolling, like, "Your friends have awful timing." But my mom's face changed immediately, because Mira didn't know them. So my mom went to the window, pulled the curtain back just enough to look out, and asked Nana Salma if she recognized them. Nana Salma didn't. And that's when the mood in the house shifted from annoying to wrong. Outside, the knocking started again. Calm voices. No shouting, no banging, just that steady insistence. They said it would only take a moment. They said they only wanted to see the baby. They said they wouldn't be long. Lena started to get nervous, like the kind of nervous that makes your skin feel too tight. She was young, and she didn't have the words for it, but she knew something was off. It wasn't just strangers. It was the certainty in them, like the door wasn't really a boundary. She slipped out the back door and ran to a friend's house nearby. Someone she trusted, someone older, someone who could make the situation feel less unreal. And because teenagers travel in packs and drama spreads like wildfire, within minutes, a handful of her friends came back with her. Suddenly, there were voices outside our house. Not just the women at the door, but young people whispering and asking questions and trying to look brave. That part always makes me smile a little, even though the story isn't funny. Because I can picture it. A bunch of late teens and early 20s friends showing up like, "All right, what's going on?" With more people around, Nana Salma felt brave enough to step forward. She wasn't a loud person, from what I'm told, more the steady, no-nonsense type. But she went to the door and confronted them, not opening it wide, not inviting them in, just making it clear she was present and alert. And the women stayed calm. They spoke softly. They tried to reason. They kept repeating that they'd come to meet the child, that it would be quick, that there was no harm in it. Then one of them said something that hit my family like ice water. Something along the lines of, "If the baby is a burden, we can take the child. The child would be cared for." Even hearing it secondhand makes my stomach turn. My mom heard that from inside and snapped into this fierce, protective anger that I've seen in her eyes even now when someone crosses a line. She stepped outside, left me inside with one of Lena's friends, a guy named Rami, who was around 20 at the time. And my mom started yelling. Not screaming nonsense, clear, sharp, "Get away from my home" yelling. She told them to leave. She said she would call the police. She said they had no right to stand there talking about taking someone's child like it was a casual favor. Lena's friends joined in too, voices layering over each other, half protective, half trying to act fearless. The neighbors started stirring. Curtains moved, doors cracked open. And finally, the women began to back away. But they didn't back away quietly. My mom says they cursed, spat out bitter words about her, about the house, about the family. And then, like a switch flipped, they turned and started moving fast. Lena's friends, full of adrenaline and youth and that dumb belief that nothing truly terrible can happen, ran after them. Not to catch them exactly, more like to scare them off, to chase them away from the neighborhood. It was chaotic, a bunch of young people sprinting down the street at night, laughing in that nervous, reckless way. And then the night turned tragic. They chased them toward this messy area, some kind of lot with abandoned junk, wires, scrap, the kind of place you shouldn't run through even in daylight. In the confusion, one of the girls in the group, Huda, that's the name I've always heard, split off from the others. She took a different route, maybe trying to cut them off, maybe just panicking. And she didn't see what was in her path. The way my family tells it, it happened in a second. A horrible accident. The kind of thing that makes a whole group of people go silent all at once, like the world loses its breath. They never describe it in detail anymore, thank God. They just say she died, and that it was sudden, and that nobody was the same after. While all of that was happening outside, neighbors gathering, my mom and Nana Salma trying to understand what they'd just heard, the street buzzing with panic. I was inside. Just me and Rami. He said I was so small, just lying there. And then, out of nowhere, I sat up. On my own. And I looked at him. Really looked at him. And in a clear voice I asked, "What are you afraid of?" Rami swears on everything that it wasn't baby noise. It wasn't a coo or a laugh that someone wanted to interpret. He says it was words. Calm words. Like a question meant to land. And he froze. He said his whole body went cold, like something had stepped into the room. Then he heard something else. A laugh. He looked up toward the window, toward the tree outside, and he saw a man. Not just any man. A man in a suit, too neat for that moment, too out of place, sitting or standing up in the branches like it was normal, watching and laughing like he found the whole thing entertaining. Rami panicked and bolted out of the house shouting for my mom. When my mom and Nana Salma rushed back in, my mom says she saw me sitting upright like someone had propped me up. And then, as if whatever was holding me let go, I fell back onto the bed and started screaming. Screaming so hard it sounded like my little body might split apart. Two neighbors later told Nana Salma they'd seen the man in the tree too. They swore it. But when people looked again, he was gone. After that night, my family didn't stay. They packed up fast. My mom took me, Nana Salma helped, and they went to Nana Salma's place for a few weeks while my mom figured out somewhere new to live. The house didn't feel safe anymore, not because the doors couldn't lock, but because the whole world felt like it had leaned in too close. There were police at some point, mostly because of Huda. Some of Lena's friends wanted to blame the women, because grief needs somewhere to go. But the official story, the one that stayed on paper, was that it was an accident. A terrible accident during a reckless chase in a dangerous place. And the women? They were never seen again. Here's the strange little epilogue my mom always adds, like she can't help it. She says that for a while after, Random people would stop her in the street and press small gifts into her hands for the baby. A bracelet, a necklace, tiny trinkets. The kind of things you'd normally think were sweet, except in the shadow of that night, it felt eerie. Like echoes. Like someone still knew where we were. And then, it faded. Years later, I ran into Rami again, older, calmer, but still carrying that memory like a scar. He told me that night pulled him off a path he didn't want to admit he was on. He started going to church. He cleaned up. He stopped taking stupid risks. He said when he thinks about it now, he doesn't even know what to believe about what he saw, but he knows what it did to him. In me? I don't know. I don't have a baby memory of sitting up and speaking. I don't have a clear answer for the man in the tree or the calm voices at the door. What I do have is the way my mom's voice tightens when she tells it, the way my grandma's eyes go distant, the way my aunt still gets angry about the audacity of strangers knocking that late. And honestly, the fact that 4 people who barely agree on anything else all agree on this, that's the part that stays with you. So yeah, that's our family story. The night they came to see the baby. So, here's something I don't tell people very often, because it sounds like the kind of story you're supposed to laugh off. But I can't, because I was there, and my mom was there, and we both heard and saw enough that it stopped feeling like nothing. I left home young. I was 16 when I moved out to another state, and after that, I didn't speak to my family for almost a decade. No calls, no visits, just gone. Then eventually, life softened a little, and I started coming back now and then. I'd stay a few days at my mom's place. Her name's Marisol, by the way. And I'd notice little things. Not full-on horror movie stuff, just odd moments that made you pause. A few years later, I got a job in her city, and I started staying with her for stretches. Never the whole year, but a few months at a time. That's when the house stopped being a little weird and started feeling aware. One morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps upstairs. Not adult footsteps, small, fast ones. Like kids sprinting down the hallway and pounding up and down the stairs, back and forth, back and forth. At first, I genuinely thought, oh, maybe my aunt dropped the cousins off, because it was that clear, that real. And then my phone buzzed. It was my mom texting me from her bedroom. Do you hear that? I remember just sitting up in bed, staring at the screen, because that was the moment my brain went, wait, you hear it too? She texted again and said she'd just woken up and the doors were locked. No one should have been in the house. The running went on for maybe another minute or two, long enough for the hair on my arms to lift. And then it stopped so suddenly it felt like someone hit mute. And right after that, this loud, heavy bang. It hit her bedroom door like a fist or a shoulder, hard enough that she screamed. The house went dead quiet immediately after. We checked everything. All locked. No sign of anyone. Cameras were only set up downstairs, and when we looked later, nothing showed up. No movement, no person, no explanation. Another time, we were downstairs in the living room in the middle of the day. Bright out, sunlight coming through the windows. We were watching some random movie, relaxed, just the two of us. And then, out of nowhere, we both saw it. A shadow moved across the stairwell opening, like someone passing from one room to another at the top of the stairs. Not a flicker, not a car headlight. It had the shape and pace of a person walking, Marisol paused the movie without even looking for the remote. We just stared at the stairs like we were waiting for someone to come down and say, "Oh hey, didn't know you were home." Nothing happened. We checked locks again, checked rooms. No one. There were other smaller things, little moments you could almost explain if you forced yourself to. But the worst one, the one that still makes my stomach tighten, happened on my last night before I went back to my own place. It was late, and we were in the backyard. Just me and her, sitting close, sharing a cigarette, talking about nothing important. The house behind us was quiet. No TV on, no music, no other people inside. Marisol stood up and said she was going in for a minute. Maybe 20 seconds went by, and then I heard her call my name. But the way she said it was wrong. Not yelling, not calm either. It was like she was trying to sound normal and couldn't. Like her voice had slipped. I put the cigarette out and went inside. And when I walked into the kitchen, every cabinet door was open. Drawers pulled out. Chairs shifted like someone had just gotten up in a hurry, or paced around, or shoved them out of the way. Marisol was standing there, frozen. Her face was pale, and she had that look people get when they're trying very hard not to cry, because if they do, they won't stop. I asked her what happened, and she just shook her head like she couldn't even form the sentence yet. The thing is, there was no time. I came in right after her. If she had done it herself, I would have heard the cabinet slamming open. I would have seen her moving around. There's just no way. We started closing everything together, quietly, like we were cleaning up after something we didn't want to admit was real. And then she said, in this tired, cracked voice, "Thank God you're leaving tomorrow. After you go, I'll finally get a few months of rest." I stopped and looked at her like, "What do you mean, rest?" And that's when she told me something I didn't expect. She said the house always has little moments. She's lived with them long enough that she tries to ignore them. But whenever I'm there, whenever I'm staying in that house, the activity gets worse. Louder, more aggressive. The whole place feels heavier, like the air changes. And she admitted she hadn't told me because she was scared I'd stop coming back. She said, "I already lost you once. I can't lose you again." That part broke me a little, because it wasn't just fear of the house. It was fear of being alone in it. And the weirdest thing is, I've had strange experiences in my own home too. I can't pretend I haven't. But for some reason, at her house, it doesn't feel directed at me. It doesn't feel like it's after me. It feels like the house is reacting to me being there. Like I'm a match, and that place is dry kindling, quiet until I walk in, and then suddenly everything catches. So, this happened last night, and I'm still kind of rattled. I'm house sitting, well, dog sitting, for some family friends of my mom's. I'm staying at their place for 4 days while they're out of town, sleeping there with their dog, Moose. When I showed up yesterday around lunchtime, like maybe 1 p.m., the front door was literally standing open. Not unlocked, open. Wide open, like someone had just walked out and forgot it existed. My stomach dropped immediately. Moose was still in his crate, totally fine, and nothing looked trashed. I texted the homeowner, Marlene, and she was weirdly calm about it. She was like, "Oh, honestly, we were rushing to the airport. We might have left it unlatched, and if there was a breeze, it could have pushed it." Which, okay, sure, maybe. But I couldn't shake the thought that someone could have been inside. It's a big house, 3 stories plus a finished basement, so I did this full-on, slightly unhinged sweep of the entire place. Every room, every bathroom, every corner that could hide a person. I checked behind shower curtains like I was in a horror movie. Eventually, I convinced myself I was alone, but I still felt off. Later that night, I went out with a couple of friends, Nina and Jonah, and they drove me back. They wanted to meet Moose, so I let them in, and I told them about the door situation because it was still bugging me. They were immediately like, "Yeah, no, that's creepy," and insisted we do another quick check together. Everything seemed normal, until we got to the guest room where I was sleeping. Nina opens the closet like she owns the place, and there, just sitting on the closet shelf like it's waiting for someone, is this old-fashioned doll. Porcelain face, glassy eyes, little frilly dress. The kind of doll that looks like it knows your secrets. We all just stared for a second, and Jonah goes, "Absolutely not." And we all laughed in that tense way people laugh when they're trying to convince themselves they're fine. I remember joking like, "Great, love that I have to sleep in here with that." Then we closed the closet doors, like, firmly, and moved on, finished walking around, and they left. And this is where it gets worse. The second they left, I realized my phone was basically dead. I start wandering around trying to find a charger, and while I'm looking, I hear these faint creaking sounds from upstairs. You know that sound houses make at night, like someone shifting their weight on the floorboards? I told myself it was just the house settling, or Moose moving around. To calm myself down, I turned on the TV in the guest room, thinking I'd just have some noise and stop spiraling. I'm scrolling through stuff to watch when Moose suddenly starts barking. Like, not normal, someone's at the door barking. This was deep, aggressive, non-stop barking. And he was looking straight at the closet. My skin went cold. I didn't even want to turn my head, but I did. And Moose is planted there like a little guard dog statue, barking at the closet doors like something was behind them. And I swear to you, it felt like my whole body had one single thought. Leave. Now. So I grabbed my keys, scooped Moose out of the room, and got out of the house. I didn't even finish finding a charger. I just left. I ended up crashing at Nina's place because I couldn't make myself go back inside alone. We walk into the guest room, and I'm already bracing myself, like, okay, the doll is still going to be in the closet, and I'm going to feel stupid for freaking out. Nina opens the closet. The shelf is empty. And then we both turn, because the doll is no longer in the closet. It's sitting on the dresser across from the bed, propped upright, like someone carefully placed it there, facing the doorway, like it was watching the room. Nina actually yelled, like a real startled noise, and I just froze. I felt like my brain couldn't decide whether to panic or laugh or cry. All day, I kept texting my friends, basically begging someone to admit it was a prank. Like, please, tell me you moved it. Tell me you're messing with me. I don't even believe in haunted dolls. I'm not that person. I want the boring explanation. But nobody confessed. Not even Jonah, who would absolutely take credit if he did something like that. And honestly, they didn't look entertained. They looked genuinely freaked out, like too freaked out to be lying. So now I'm supposed to sleep there for 3 more nights, and I'm sitting here wondering how a doll ends up moving from a closed closet to the top of a dresser when the house was locked and I wasn't even there. And I keep circling back to the same question that I hate even asking. Is it possible it moved on its own? Okay, so before I tell you any of this, I need you to know 2 things about me. 1, I'm a spiritual person. I do believe there are things we can't explain. 2, I'm also annoyingly skeptical. Like, I'll sit there for hours trying to come up with a logical reason for something before I ever let myself whisper the word. paranormal. So when I say some of this still doesn't add up, I really mean it. So, we moved into this house a little over 6 years ago, right before my sophomore year of high school. It was just me, my mom, her name's Marissa, and my dog, Atlas. No dad in the picture, not really. Just the three of us trying to make a home feel like a home. And the very first night we moved in, the house pulled something on us. I remember hearing Marissa lock the front door, and then I heard her jog upstairs like she was going to wash her face, brush her teeth, that kind of end-of-day routine. I stayed downstairs because I wanted a cookie. Like, after a day of hauling boxes around, I felt entitled to a cookie. I'm in the kitchen, half in a cabinet, when there's a knock at the front door. Just a normal knock. Firm, like someone who expects you to answer. I froze, because who knocks that late on move-in night? And then I hear Marissa's voice from outside, tight, embarrassed, a little panicky, saying she'd gone back out to grab something from the car and the door had locked behind her. So right away, it's like the house wanted us to know, I can lock you out whenever I want. Nothing huge happened for a while after that. Or maybe it did, and I just didn't have the language for it yet. Mostly it was a feeling, like the air in the dining room was heavier than the rest of the house. Like if you sat in there too long, you'd start glancing over your shoulder for no reason. I used to tell myself it was just the lighting, or the way sound carried, or the fact that the room always felt a little colder. But then I left for college, and when I came back, it was different. Like something had shifted while I was gone. I have a few theories, and honestly, I go back and forth on them. Marissa had brought home this antique grandfather clock sometime after I moved out. Beautiful, old, the kind that makes the room feel older just by existing in it. That's theory number 1, the clock. Theory number 2 is that whatever had been quiet while I lived there didn't like that I was gone. Like I'd been some kind of accidental anchor, and once I left, it had more room to breathe. And theory number 3, this one is the hardest to say out loud, is that it feeds on emotion. Because my mom was having a rough time. Not just missing me, but other personal stuff too. The house wasn't peaceful for a while. It was heavy. Whatever the reason, the thing didn't feel like it lived in the dining room anymore. It felt like it had moved into the living room, right near that clock. And after that, it started to migrate. Like it didn't have one spot. It had a route. The first time I got genuinely scared again was during winter break. Marissa was upstairs wrapping gifts, and I was in the living room with Atlas. He was sprawled out next to me, calm, sleepy. And then out of nowhere he stood up, stiff, and started doing this low whine. Not like he needed to go out, not like he heard a squirrel, more like, please don't make me look at that. And I swear to you, his back leg jerked like someone had tugged it. Not a cramp, not a twitch. It pulled in a way that made my stomach drop. I jumped up and rushed to him, thinking he'd somehow injured himself, like he broke something. And right then, right after I grabbed him, I heard a crash. So I yelled her name and ran toward the dining room. And there, scattered across the floor like confetti made of danger, were shards of glass. A candle holder, empty, sitting on a sideboard earlier, had been thrown from the dining room into the kitchen. Not tipped over, not slid off. Thrown. The fragments were everywhere, wall to wall, like something wanted to prove it could reach across rooms. Marissa came halfway down the stairs, white-faced, asking what happened. And all I could do was stand there with Atlas pressed against my legs and say, I don't know. Because I truly didn't. I kept trying to replay it. Wind? Vibration? A truck passing? The dog bumping furniture? but it didn't make sense. The angle didn't make sense. The distance didn't make sense. After that, the smaller things started. At night, I'd hear scratching above my room. Not the cute kind where you tell yourself it's a squirrel. It sounded deliberate, like nails dragging, stopping, starting again. And the weirdest part was this. When I'd sit up and listen, really listen, it would stop. Like it knew I was paying attention. Then I'd lay back down, tell myself I was being ridiculous, close my eyes, and it would start again. Sometimes faster, like it was annoyed I'd challenged it. But the moment that still makes my skin prickle, like I can feel it behind my neck even now, was when I tried to meditate on it. I was home alone except for Atlas. It was daytime, which I thought made it safer. I sat on the floor, and Atlas flopped beside me like, "Cool, we're doing the calm thing." I got into a good meditative state. Quiet, steady. The kind where your mind finally stops sprinting. And then the floor vibrated. Not like a phone buzzing, like the house itself shuddered. And I felt, not heard, something rush up the stairs. Fast, heavy, like footsteps without feet, like the air moved with intention. It came straight at me. I snapped my eyes open so fast it made me dizzy, and Atlas whipped his head around at the exact same moment, staring at the same empty space I was staring at. Nothing was there. But we both saw something, or sensed it, or whatever the word is when your body recognizes a threat before your brain can label it. Now, every so often, Atlas will act strange, clingy, pacing, staring at corners, until I cleanse the house. I know how that sounds. I really do. But I've done it enough times now to recognize the pattern. I cleanse, the atmosphere lightens, and he settles. I'm trying my best to ignore whatever this is, because engaging with it feels like giving it a microphone. But ignoring it can be hard. Like a couple nights ago, I could have sworn I heard Marissa call my name, clear as day, from downstairs. Only she wasn't home, and it was the middle of the night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling like, nope, absolutely not. I didn't answer. I didn't go check. I didn't even sit up. I pretended I was asleep so aggressively I almost convinced myself. And then there's something else. Something that weirdly makes me feel safer. My great-grandmother Elowen passed away during the pandemic, and sometimes, late at night or early in the morning, I'll smell her scent in my room. Not like a random whiff that could be detergent or memory. It's her. Soft, powdery, familiar. And with it comes this overwhelming feeling of presence, like someone loving just stepped into the doorway. And when that happens, the paranoia fades. That awful being watched feeling just dissolves. It's like whatever else is in the house can't reach me when she's near, or won't. I get it. And listen, could some of this be my imagination? Sure. I have a vivid mind. I spiral sometimes. I'm aware of that. I also know anxiety can paint shadows into monsters. But I can't make peace with all of it being in my head when there are physical things. Curtains shifting when no windows are open. Objects moving. That glass candle holder traveling across rooms. That's the part that scares me most, honestly. Not even the ghost idea. It's the thought that something real is happening, and that reacting to it might be feeding my own anxiety, making me more paranoid, making me question what I'm seeing and hearing. So right now, my plan is simple. Protect my peace, keep the house as calm as I can, cleanse when it feels heavy, and trust Atlas when he tells me something's off. And if my name gets called again in the dark when no one's home? Nope. That is a hard, full-body, spiritual no from me. So, I grew up in this old house that always felt a little off. You know the kind. Too quiet in the wrong moments. Creaks that don't sound like settling. Shadows that seem to take their time. When I was about 5 or 6, I remember being ridiculously excited because a pastor was coming over to talk with my mom. She'd struggled with her mental health for as long as I can remember, and back then, she was reaching for anything that might help. Faith, prayer, someone kind who would listen. I was the type of kid who wanted to meet every new person who walked through the door, so I lay in bed, buzzing with hope that I'd be allowed downstairs. Of course, the visit was after my bedtime. I couldn't sleep. I just lay there with my little nightlight on, staring at the edge of my room, listening to the house breathe. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, careful steps, like someone trying not to wake the whole place. The stairs in that house were ancient and loud, so you heard everything. The steps came down the hall and stopped right outside my bedroom. My door opened. I swear, I heard the floorboards creak like somebody walked into my room. One step, then another, like they were crossing from the doorway toward my bed. Except, there was nobody there. With that nightlight, I could see plenty. Nothing in the doorway, nothing moving, nothing to blame it on. And that kind of thing didn't just happen once. It happened enough that it became its own horrible routine. My door nudging open when it shouldn't. The sense that something was lingering just out of sight. The gross feeling of being watched when I was trying to fall asleep. It never escalated into anything dramatic. Mostly just constant little reminders that the house didn't feel empty even when it was. Years passed. Then, in the mid-90s, 1996 for me, I had the night that basically sealed it. I was 14 and home alone. My parents had divorced by then, and I lived with my dad. He was spending the night with my stepmom, Marlene, who lived a short walk away. Like, not far at all. We were also in the middle of moving out, so my room was half chaos. Boxes, clothes in piles, posters half torn down. I should have been packing. I wasn't. I was up late watching wrestling and pretending I'd start in a minute. Around midnight-ish, I finally went to bed. I was flipping through a magazine trying to settle down when it hit me. This sudden, violent wave of fear out of nowhere. Not, I heard a noise fear. Not, I watched something creepy fear. It was like my body decided I was in danger before my brain had any reason to. My stomach dropped. I got nauseous, like I might actually throw up. And then my pets reacted, way worse than I did. My dog Tilly started whining like she was hurt, then barking like she'd lost her mind. At the room, not at the door, not at a sound, just at the space. She was shaking so badly she actually peed on the floor, which she never did. My cat Juniper was up on the windowsill with her face shoved into the curtain, making this thin, miserable crying sound like she was begging for something to stop. That's when I realized it wasn't just fear. It was the feeling of being observed, like something was in the corner of my room, staring straight through me. After what felt like forever, I somehow got up. I didn't walk. I bolted. And the moment I moved, I felt it behind me, right on my back, like a pressure that chased me out of the room. I ran into the front room and grabbed the phone with shaking hands and called my dad. I don't even remember what I said properly, just that he needed to come now, immediately, no questions. The fear was unbearable, like being stared at so hard it hurt. That's the only way I can explain it, even though it doesn't sound logical. It was like the attention itself was painful. And then I did the one thing I didn't even know I was capable of. I yanked the front door open and ran outside into the street in my socks, half sobbing, half gagging, and I just collapsed. I fell right down in the road like my legs gave out. I could still feel it watching. Not from the corner anymore, from the doorway. I couldn't tell you what it looked like. I don't have an image to describe. It's like my brain refused to form one, like it protected itself by leaving that part blank. I just knew something was there, framed by the open door, staring out at me. Tilly was stuck halfway up the stairs, crying and shaking so hard her paws slipped on the steps. She wouldn't come down and she wouldn't go back up, just trapped in terror. When my dad finally arrived, he ran inside without even thinking, scooped her up and carried her out. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I never went back into that house again. Not for a last look, not to grab anything I left behind. Nothing. The next day, my dad sat me down and told me, really calmly, like he'd been holding it in for years, that he'd had experiences too. He used to nag me about holding the banister when I came downstairs. I thought he was just being annoying, like dads are. But he told me he'd sometimes feel something grab him and trip him on the stairs, like an actual tug, like someone trying to make him fall. He said the upstairs was the worst part of the house by far, and he'd never told me because he didn't want to scare me. And honestly, I'm glad he didn't, because just hearing him confirm it made my skin go cold. I've never felt anything like that since, not even close. And I really, truly hope I never do again. So, I've seen a lot in my life, but this is the one that still gets under my skin when I talk about it. When I was about 16, maybe just turned 17, I was living with my grandma and grandpa for a while. I called them Nana and Papa, like everyone in the family did. Not long after I moved in, my cousin moved in too. Her name was Mariah. We were close like sisters back then, always up late, always trying to shake off whatever the day had piled on us. One night in the fall, the air had that crisp bite to it, and the leaves were everywhere, wet, stuck to the ground like they didn't want to let go. Mariah and I were outside behind the house, just having a smoke and decompressing before bed. Behind us, off to the left, there was this little dip in the land, more like a shallow ravine with a narrow stream at the bottom. It wasn't far, maybe 100 feet or so. The slope down to it was steep, like an awkward, slippery drop you'd regret if you fell. We're mid-conversation, mid-laugh, and then we hear it. Footsteps. Not on the driveway, not on the porch, in the water. A slow, sloshing sound like someone's walking right through the stream, and then the crunch of leaves, like whoever it is climbing up the slope toward us. But the weird part was, we couldn't see anyone. Not a silhouette, not a shape, not even a flicker of movement. Just those footsteps, coming closer, like they knew exactly where we were. I remember freezing with the cigarette halfway to my mouth, just staring at the dark, trying to force my eyes to find a person that wasn't there. Mariah didn't say a word. She just grabbed my sleeve, and we both bolted for the basement door like our lives depended on it. We didn't try to be brave. We didn't call out. We just ran. Once we got inside, we locked up and headed upstairs to the kitchen because, ironically, we were suddenly starving. That nervous, hungry feeling, you know? Like your body's trying to pretend everything is normal. Mariah goes, "Turn on the lamp in the living room so we can eat in there." So I'm walking from the kitchen toward the living room, and there's this dividing wall between the two spaces. I pass the edge of it, and out of the corner of my eye, I see her. A woman. She's sitting low to the ground in this crouched, unnatural pose, like knees wide, folded down, arms tight in, almost like she's trying to make herself small but can't. And she's staring straight at me. Her hair is all teased up like an old-school hairstyle, messy and puffed out. She's wearing this pale hospital-style outfit, like a patient gown or those loose clinical clothes. And her face, her expression looked panicked. Not angry, not threatening, just terrified, like she was trapped somewhere she couldn't escape. My whole body went cold. I didn't even think. I just snapped around and backed into the kitchen so fast I nearly knocked into the counter. I'm whisper yelling, "Mariah, I just saw someone in the living room." She's like, "What do you mean, someone?" "I mean a woman, sitting on the floor, looking at me." So we go back in together, hearts pounding, and Mariah flips the light on. And the living room is empty. No woman, no shadow, nothing. Just furniture, quiet, normal. We're standing there staring at each other like, okay, did I imagine that? Did my brain fill in a shape because I was scared from those footsteps? But then, this is the part that made it worse. We're eating at the kitchen table a little later, and from where I'm sitting I can see straight into the back family room. And I see a figure. He moves calmly across the room, like he has somewhere to be. And he walks toward the glass door that leads to the balcony. And that balcony sits directly above the spot where we'd been outside earlier, right above that slope and that little stream. I just sat there with my food untouched, watching him move, unable to breathe right. And then he was gone, like he stepped into nothing. After that night, I didn't want to be outside back there anymore. I didn't want to be alone in any room. I didn't even want to look toward the living room when the lights were off. A few months later, maybe 4 or 5, I moved back in with my mom. New place, different energy, different neighborhood. I told myself whatever that was, it was tied to Nana and Papa's house, that I'd left it behind. And then, about a week after I moved in, I woke up around 3 in the morning needing to use the bathroom. The house was silent, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only living thing awake. I cracked my bedroom door and looked out into the hallway toward the living room. And she was there. That same woman, same hair, same hospital clothing. But this time, she wasn't sitting upright. She was on the living room floor, flat on her stomach, like she'd been dropped there. And her arms and legs were bent in wrong directions, folded and twisted like joints didn't matter. And her head was turned back, too far, like it had rotated on a hinge it shouldn't have. Her mouth was open in this broken way, stretched wider than a human mouth should open. And where her eyes should have been, there was nothing. No eyes, just absence. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I swear my whole body locked up. It felt like my brain was trying to protect me by refusing to react. And then I blinked, because of course you do, right? Like you're hoping it'll reset the scene, and she wasn't gone in the way a normal thing disappears. It was more like the room couldn't hold her anymore, like she faded out of it. I shut my door so gently, I don't even know how my hands stopped shaking long enough to do it. And I sat on my bed until the morning light came up, because I couldn't convince myself to walk past that spot. It's hard to explain what something like that does to you, because I can't fully describe her, not in a way that feels accurate, but I can see her perfectly in my head. And once you've seen something like that, whether it was real or not, it changes the way the dark feels. It's something I can't unsee, even if part of me wishes I could.